The Krusty Krab was once a retirement home, and Mr. Krabs bought it specifically because it was already shaped like a lobster trap, which tells you everything you need to know about how his brain works. Now, SpongeBob's relationship with continuity is complicated at best, which is what happens when you have a show that's been on the air for over 2 decades, and the writers seem to treat their own timeline like a suggestion rather than a rule book. But we're going to try to make sense of it anyway, focusing on the primary animated series and the theatrical films, leaving out the video games, comics and spin-offs, like Camp Coral or The Patrick Star Show, because otherwise we'd be here until the heat death of the universe. The history of Bikini Bottom goes back absurdly far, long before any sponges or squirrels showed up. So we're starting at the very beginning with the deep past. So the Krusty Krab has been in the exact same spot for roughly 4 million years, which I need you to understand is not a joke, that's just canon. The building we see in modern Bikini Bottom, the one where SpongeBob flips patties for minimum wage, occupies the same physical location as a primitive cave dwelling that existed in the prehistoric era, and the show has confirmed this multiple times across different episodes. We're talking about a fast food restaurant with a longer continuous operational history than most mountain ranges. The prehistoric era of what will eventually become Bikini Bottom is, as far as we can tell from the fossil record and the handful of time travel incidents that have occurred, functionally identical to the modern version, except everyone's slightly hairier and nobody's invented clothing yet. Primitive sea creatures inhabit the area, and by primitive, I don't mean they're evolutionarily distinct, I mean they're culturally primitive, because evolution in the SpongeBob universe works on what I can only describe as vibes-based logic. These creatures look almost exactly like their modern descendants. They just happen to live in rocks instead of houses and communicate in grunts instead of English, which raises about 17 questions about how speciation works underwater that we're not going to answer, because the writers certainly didn't. The marine life present during this period includes early forms of jellyfish, and I want to be clear about what that means. These are not proto-jellyfish or jellyfish ancestors. These are just jellyfish that happen to exist in prehistoric times. They buzz, they sting, they're pink and translucent. They're identical to modern jellyfish in every way that matters. The same goes for every other species we see. There's no evolutionary progression happening here. No gradual adaptation to environment. Just a bunch of sea creatures doing sea creature things in a time period that happens to be really old. The kelp forests are there, the coral formations are there, the underwater physics that allow for campfires and explosions are fully operational. It's less primordial ocean and more modern ocean, but everyone's cosplaying as cavemen. The Krusty Krab building, or the proto-Krusty Krab, or whatever we're calling it, exists as a cave structure. Not a cave that will someday be renovated into the restaurant, but a cave that is already shaped like the restaurant, complete with the basic floor plan. This cave dwelling sits on the same plot of ocean floor, and you can recognise it because it has the same general proportions and layout. There's a large open area corresponding to the dining room, a smaller area in back where the kitchen would eventually be, and even what looks like a separate entrance that matches where the kitchen door is, in the modern version. Nobody's running a business out of it yet because currency hasn't been invented, or if it has been invented, the show hasn't told us about it, but the architecture is there, waiting. The implications of this are staggering if you think about them for more than 10 seconds. Either this specific cave formation was so perfectly suited to food service that someone millions of years later built a restaurant around its exact dimensions, or there's some kind of temporal inevitability to the Krusty Krab's existence. Like the universe itself demands that this location must serve fried food. Primitive SpongeBob lives in this era, and he's a yellow porous creature, because of course he is. His dwelling is a pineapple-shaped rock, not an actual pineapple, which makes sense given that pineapples are terrestrial plants that have no business being on the ocean floor in any time period, prehistoric or otherwise. This rock has the same general dimensions and shape as the pineapple house we see in modern episodes, complete with the rough positions of windows and a door. Primitive SpongeBob himself is slightly more rounded than his modern counterpart, a little less defined in his edges, but he's still got the same basic body structure, the same gap-toothed smile, the same wide-eyed enthusiasm for whatever activity he's currently engaged in. He wears no clothing, which is consistent with the era, but he's also not anatomically detailed in any way, so it's fine. His personality appears to be identical to modern SpongeBob, just expressed through grunts and gestures instead of rapid-fire dialogue. He's cheerful, he's energetic, he's deeply invested in activities that don't matter. He's already annoying his neighbours. 4 million years of history and character development have changed nothing about this sponge's core identity. Primitive Patrick lives under a rock, because some things are truly eternal. The rock is just a rock. No special shape, no distinguishing features, just a big chunk of stone sitting on the ocean floor. Primitive Patrick is a pink starfish, slightly pudgier than modern Patrick, if that's even possible, with the same vacant expression and the same total lack of urgency about anything. He and Primitive SpongeBob are already best friends, which suggests that their relationship transcends time itself, or that Patrick's family and SpongeBob's family have been locked in this same codependent friendship cycle for millions of years. Either option is equally plausible and equally disturbing. Primitive Patrick's intelligence level appears to be exactly the same as modern Patrick's, which is to say, he's got maybe 3 brain cells, and they're all on vacation. He responds to Primitive SpongeBob's enthusiasm with the same dim-witted willingness to go along with whatever's happening. No questions asked, no thoughts occurring. Primitive Squidward lives in a moai-shaped rock, one of those big Easter Island head statues, except it's a rock formation that naturally occurred in that exact shape. The odds of this are astronomically small, but we're not questioning it because we're already accepting underwater campfires and the eternal Krusty Krab, so a coincidentally head-shaped rock barely registers. Primitive Squidward is a blue cephalopod, with the same droopy eyes, the same prominent nose structure, the same general aura of someone who's already exhausted by life, and nothing has even happened yet. He lives between Primitive SpongeBob and Primitive Patrick, because the universe has always been cruel to Squidward, specifically, across all time periods, without exception. His house rock is positioned in the same relative location as his modern Easter Island house, forming the same triangular neighbourhood pattern. This is not a coincidence. This is cosmic bullying on a geological timescale. The social dynamics are already firmly established. Primitive SpongeBob and Primitive Patrick are inseparable. They're already engaging in activities together. They're already operating as a unit. Primitive Squidward is already isolated, already irritated, already watching his neighbours with the kind of weary disdain that will define his entire existence across millennia. There's no origin story here, no first meeting, no gradual formation of these relationships. They just exist, fully formed, as if these 3 individuals are locked in an eternal pattern that reasserts itself regardless of time period or circumstance. Primitive SpongeBob and Primitive Patrick engage in rudimentary jellyfishing, which is exactly what it sounds like. They chase jellyfish around the prehistoric kelp forests using nets made of vines, just woven plant material formed into a rough net shape. The activity is identical to modern jellyfishing in every way that matters. They run around, they swing their nets, they occasionally catch a jellyfish, they laugh and grunt with excitement. The jellyfish, for their part, seem just as willing to be caught and released in this time period as they are in the modern era, suggesting that either jellyfish have no memory or they're all engaged in some kind of elaborate game that spans millions of years. The nets are less refined than the metal frame nets we see in modern episodes, but they function the same way, which raises questions about whether jellyfishing is an instinctive behaviour or a cultural practice that's been passed down through so many generations that it's become indistinguishable from instinct. At some point during their jellyfishing activities, primitive SpongeBob and primitive Patrick discover fire. They accomplish this by rubbing two sticks together, which is the standard caveman method, except they're doing it underwater, where fire should not be possible, due to the lack of oxygen and the presence of, water. The sticks generate friction, the friction generates heat, the heat generates a flame, and the flame just burns normally, as if air exists. This is maybe the third or fourth most absurd thing about underwater physics in this universe. So we're moving on. The two of them are excited about this discovery in the way that primitive beings are always excited about fire in these types of stories. They grunt, they gesture, they stare at the flame with wonder. Primitive Squidward, watching from a distance, is not excited. Primitive Squidward is already anticipating that this will become his problem, which it will. The discovery of fire leads directly to the next innovation, because primitive SpongeBob and primitive Patrick have just caught a jellyfish, and they're now holding both a jellyfish and fire simultaneously, and their combined 3 brain cells manage to connect these two facts into a single idea. They use the fire to cook the jellyfish, holding it over the flames until it's heated through. The result is what we can only describe as a primitive jelly patty, the earliest known form of cooked food in Bikini Bottom history. It's not a proper Krabby patty. There's no bun, no secret formula, no sesame seeds, just a cooked jellyfish that's vaguely patty-shaped. But it's hot, it's prepared, it's food that's been transformed by fire from its raw state into something else. And that makes it cuisine, technically. They eat it, or at least they appear to eat it, and they seem pleased with the results. This is the first culinary achievement in Bikini Bottom's history, and it happens because 2 idiots accidentally combined the things they were holding. Primitive Squidward watches all of this unfold from his moai-shaped rock, and he is annoyed. Not angry, not concerned, just deeply, profoundly annoyed in that specific way that Squidward has perfected across all time periods. His expression makes it clear that he thinks his neighbours are idiots, that their activities are pointless, that the noise and commotion are disturbing whatever prehistoric equivalent of clarinet practice he was engaged in. So at some point these two finally stumble onto something genuinely useful, which is the wheel. And I want to be clear about this. The wheel is invented twice in this universe. Once here in the prehistoric era by primitive SpongeBob and primitive Patrick, and then again much later by modern civilization, which suggests that either the wheel was completely forgotten in the intervening millions of years, or the show just doesn't care about continuity. I'm leaning toward the second one. The thing is, when they first create this circular object, probably by accident while banging rocks together or something, they don't immediately recognize its transportation potential. Instead, they use it for entertainment. They just kind of roll it back and forth between each other like it's the most fascinating toy ever invented, which, to be fair, it probably is when you're working with a brain the size of a walnut. They're genuinely delighted by the fact that this round thing goes in a continuous direction without stopping. Revolutionary stuff. Then one of them, and I genuinely think it's primitive SpongeBob, because he's usually the one with ideas that are technically clever but practically disastrous, gets the bright idea to stack 2 wheels on top of each other, attach them with a stick, and create what is functionally a primitive unicycle. This is insane for several reasons. First, the unicycle is arguably harder to invent than the regular wheel and axle cart situation. Second, it's definitely harder to ride. Third, These are creatures who have demonstrated approximately zero balance or coordination up to this point. They both attempt to ride this thing. I'm talking full attempts, where they're climbing onto this wobbly disaster and immediately falling off in different directions. Primitive Patrick tries it and immediately tips forward, rolls down a hill and crashes into a rock. Primitive SpongeBob tries it and somehow manages to stay upright for about 3 seconds before veering wildly to the left and colliding with a prehistoric coral tree. Neither of them seems to learn from these failures. They just keep trying, over and over, with the same results, which tracks perfectly with their descendants' problem-solving abilities. While they're in the middle of one of these unicycle attempts, probably their 15th or 20th, they encounter a giant prehistoric worm. This thing is massive, easily the size of a modern building, with teeth that look like they could grind rocks into powder. It erupts from the ground in front of them, which is apparently just something worms do in this universe regardless of the time period, and it is immediately hostile. The worm doesn't seem to have a specific motivation beyond, I am large and you're small, and that's a problem for you. It starts chasing them with the kind of single-minded determination that suggests it hasn't eaten in a while. Now here's where their ingenuity actually comes into play. Instead of just running in a straight line, like any sensible prehistoric creature would do, primitive SpongeBob and primitive Patrick use the environment to their advantage. They lead the worm on a chase through a series of rock formations, and at one point they manage to get the worm to follow them in a circle. The worm, not being particularly bright even by prehistoric standards, doesn't realise it's chasing its own tail until it's tied itself into a knot. An actual knot. This worm ties itself into a physical knot because it's too focused on eating them to notice what its own body's doing. They escape, and the worm is just stuck there, thrashing around in a tangle of its own making. I don't know what eventually happens to that worm. Presumably, it either figures out how to untie itself or it doesn't, and it becomes a cautionary tale for other prehistoric worms, assuming worms have oral traditions. After this near-death experience, you'd think they'd maybe take a break, reassess their life choices, but no. Instead, they discover the concept of money. Specifically, they find shells. Not like the shells that modern Bikini Bottom uses as currency. These are different shells. Bigger, chunkier, probably harder to carry around. One of them picks up a shell, looks at it, looks at the other one, and you can see the primitive gears turning. The shell becomes valuable, not because it has any inherent use, but because they both agree it has value. This is actually a pretty sophisticated economic concept for two creatures who just invented the wheel 5 minutes ago. They start collecting shells, just grabbing them from the ocean floor, which is also the ground because they're underwater, and hoarding them in little piles. Primitive SpongeBob has a pile, primitive Patrick has a pile, and they keep looking at each other's piles like they're worried the other one has more. This is the birth of wealth inequality, happening in real time, in the prehistoric era. Then they attempt to trade these shells for goods. The problem is, there aren't really any goods to trade for. There's no established marketplace, no other vendors, no economy to speak of. But there is a primitive version of what will eventually become the Krusty Krab, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, they try to trade shells with each other. Primitive Patrick offers primitive SpongeBob 3 shells for a rock. Just a rock. A regular rock that's sitting on the ground. Primitive SpongeBob considers this, counts his shells, and agrees to the trade. They exchange the shells and the rock with the solemnity of 2 businessmen closing a major deal. Neither of them seems to realise that rocks are freely available everywhere, and shells are also freely available everywhere, and this entire transaction is meaningless. At some point during all of this, they invent rudimentary tools. The club is the main one. It's basically just a thick stick or a bone, something you can swing at things. Primitive SpongeBob creates one by picking up a large branch and testing its weight. He swings it around a few times, nearly hits Primitive Patrick in the head, and decides it's perfect. Primitive Patrick immediately wants one too, so he finds his own branch, and now they're both armed with clubs. They don't use these clubs for hunting or defense or any practical purpose. Instead, they engage in a primitive game of tag. One of them is it, which is communicated through a series of grunts and gestures, and that person has to chase the other one and hit them with the club. Not hard enough to cause serious injury, but hard enough that you definitely know you've been tagged. They run around the prehistoric landscape, jumping over rocks, dodging around coral formations, occasionally falling into holes and whacking each other with sticks. This goes on for what seems like hours. The rules are inconsistent. Sometimes touching with your hand counts as a tag. Sometimes it has to be the club. Sometimes they both forget who's it and they're just chasing each other in circles. And here's the thing that really ties this all together. During one of their tag game sessions, they run past a cave dwelling. This cave has been carved out of a rock formation, and it has a primitive sign hanging above the entrance. The sign is made of stone, roughly carved, but unmistakable. It says Krusty Krab, or at least it has a primitive pictogram that clearly represents a crab and some kind of food service. The spelling might not be exact because written language hasn't been fully developed yet, but the intent is crystal clear. This raises so many questions. Is this the original Krusty Krab? Is this the same location where the modern Krusty Krab will eventually be built? Did the concept of the Krusty Krab exist in prehistoric times, and then get forgotten, and then get reinvented later by Mr. Krabs? Or is there an unbroken line of Krusty Krab stretching back millions of years? The show does not answer this. The cave is just there, with its sign, existing in the background, while primitive SpongeBob and primitive Patrick continue their game of tag. There's no indication of who runs this prehistoric Krusty Krab. There's no primitive Mr. Krabs shown, no prehistoric Squidward taking orders. It's just the building and the sign, suggesting that the Krusty Krab as a concept, as an institution, predates any individual character's involvement with it. The Krusty Krab isn't something Mr. Krabs created, it's something he inherited from the depths of time itself. That's either deeply meaningful or completely meaningless, depending on how much you think the writers were planning ahead. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think they were planning ahead at all. So after the dinosaurs and the cavemen, and the frankly inexplicable amount of fire that somehow worked underwater, we move into what the show calls ancient times. And I need to be clear here, this is not like 100 years later. We're talking thousands, possibly tens of thousands of years, and the show is maddeningly vague about the actual timeline, which is going to become a recurring problem. Trust me on that. The first thing you need to know about ancient times in the SpongeBob universe is that there were multiple advanced civilizations happening simultaneously, and they all somehow coexisted without apparently knowing about each other, which makes absolutely no sense, but here we are. The most important of these are the Atlanteans, who show up in the special Atlantis SquarePants and are treated like they're this legendary lost civilization, except they're very much still around, it is just in a different location. The Atlanteans built massive cities with technology that shouldn't exist yet, and I'm not talking about like slightly advanced stone tools. I'm talking about weapons that can vaporize things, bubble travel systems, and a society so obsessed with art and culture that they built an entire museum just to house the world's oldest living bubble. Which, okay, that's actually pretty on brand for an underwater civilization, now that I think about it. Now, around this same time, you've got King Neptune's lineage getting established. And this is where the writers really did us dirty, because there are at least two completely different King Neptunes in this show. You've got the buff, angry, kind of dumb Neptune from the movie, and then you've got the old, regal, has a giant crown Neptune from the regular show. And they are explicitly not the same person. The show never clarifies if they're related, if one is the father of the other, or if Neptune is just a title that gets passed around like a particularly wet, hot potato. What we do know is that by ancient times, there's a Neptune bloodline, and they rule over the oceans with what appears to be absolute authority, except when they don't, because sometimes random fish just ignore them completely and face no consequences. The Neptune family has this whole palace situation, which we see multiple times, and it's exactly as over the top as you'd expect. Gold and everything, tridents everywhere. The guy has a crown that's so important it becomes a plot point multiple times. And apparently, the Neptune lineage has been around long enough that by the time we get to the modern day, there are ancient laws and decrees that still apply, which means this monarchy has been running for thousands of years, and somehow the ocean hasn't had a single successful revolution. The fish are either very loyal or very bad at organising. Meanwhile, Atlantis is doing its thing. The city gets founded sometime in this era, and it becomes the crown jewel of ancient ocean civilization. We're talking golden domes, spires that reach up toward the surface, and again, that technology that makes no sense for the time period. The Atlanteans develop art, music, science, and they're so advanced that they create the oldest living bubble, which they then protect with a sophisticated alarm system. The bubble, by the way, is just sitting there. It's not doing anything. It's just old and they're very proud of it, which honestly is the most realistic thing about any ancient civilization I've ever heard. The Atlanteans also develop weapons, which becomes important later, but for now just know that they have a tank full of tiny sentient weapons that sing and dance, and if that sounds insane, it's because it is. The Atlanteans apparently had the technology to create artificial life, and they used it to make weaponry that performs musical numbers. Priorities. So while Atlantis is thriving with its singing weapons and precious bubbles, the ancient city of Bikini Bottom gets established. And this is separate from the prehistoric settlement we talked about earlier. This is a proper city, or at least the beginnings of one. The ancient Bikini Bottomites, and yes, that's what they're called, start building actual structures instead of just hitting each other with clubs. They've got stone buildings, roads, the whole deal. It's still pretty primitive compared to Atlantis, but they're making progress. The population of ancient Bikini Bottom consists of primitive sponges, starfish, squids, crabs, all the species we see in the modern day, just earlier versions. And here's where it gets weird. They look almost identical to their modern descendants, like you'd think there'd be more evolution happening over thousands of years, but no. The ancient sponges look like SpongeBob. The ancient starfish look like Patrick. Everyone's just wearing different clothes. The show does this thing where they just slap a caveman outfit on a character and call it ancient, which is lazy but also kind of hilarious. These ancient Bikini Bottomites are living their lives, doing ancient fish things, and at some point, somebody invents an early form of the Krabby Patty. We see this in Atlantis SquarePants, where there's an ancient patty that's been preserved for thousands of years, and also in Dunces and Dragons, where medieval Bikini Bottomites are eating patties, which means the recipe has been around for at least 1,000 years, probably more. And this raises so many questions. Who invented it? Was it one person, or did multiple cultures independently develop the same sandwich? Why is the recipe so consistent across thousands of years? The show never tells us, but what we do know is that ancient Bikini Bottomites were eating some form of Krabby Patty, and they loved it just as much as modern fish do. The patty thing is actually important because it suggests that ancient Bikini Bottom had developed cooking, which means they had fire underwater, which we've already established makes no sense, but we're just going to keep moving. They're cooking patties, which means they've figured out how to harvest kelp for buns, how to grow tomatoes and lettuce underwater, and how to form ground up something into a patty shape. The logistics of underwater agriculture alone could fill an entire video, but the show just hand-waves it. As the ancient city develops, the Bikini Bottomites start creating basic tools and structures. We're talking hammers, chisels, wheels, even though wheels are kind of useless underwater because there's no friction, but again, don't think about it too hard. They build houses out of stone and coral, they carve roads, they establish what looks like a central town square. It's primitive compared to modern Bikini Bottom, but it's recognisable as a civilization. They've got social structures, division of labour, probably some kind of government, though the show never clarifies what that looks like. And then we get to the ancestors. The first known ancestors of SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick Star are living in ancient Bikini Bottom during this period. We see SpongeBob's ancestors in a few episodes, and they're all basically identical to him. Same square shape, same buck teeth, same annoying laugh. The SquarePants family has apparently looked the same for thousands of years, which either means they've achieved perfect evolutionary stability or the animators didn't want to design new characters. I'm guessing it's the second one. Patrick's ancestors are the same deal. There's a primitive starfish who looks exactly like Patrick, just dumber, which is saying something. The star family tree is apparently just a flat line of identical pink starfish stretching back into prehistory, and both families are already living in Bikini Bottom, which suggests that their ancestors were part of the original settlement, making SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship a continuation of a relationship that's lasted thousands of years. Or it's a coincidence. The show could go either way. These ancient Bikini Bottomites are engaging in early forms of fishing and gathering, which is darkly hilarious when you remember that they're fish. They're fishing for other fish, underwater. The show plays this completely straight, showing ancient fish with spears hunting other fish. And nobody acknowledges how messed up that is. They're also gathering kelp, sea vegetables, whatever else grows on the ocean floor. They've got a whole hunter-gatherer thing going on, even though they're also apparently farming and cooking. So the economic system is kind of all over the place. So while all this evolutionary chaos is happening, Atlantis is absolutely thriving. We're talking golden age, peak civilization, the whole underwater utopia package. The Atlantean citizens are living in what can only be described as ridiculous prosperity under their monarchy, which at this point is being run by King Neptune's ancestors. And I want to be clear here. When I say ancestors, I mean the direct royal lineage that eventually leads to the trident-wielding Neptune we see throwing tantrums about his crown in the later eras. These early Neptune rulers are apparently governing with actual wisdom and power, which is kind of refreshing because their descendant spends most of his screen time being a temperamental man-child who nearly executes people over bald jokes. But we'll get to that. The thing about these ancient Atlantean kings is that they're not just sitting on thrones looking important. They're actively wielding what the show refers to as magic, which in the SpongeBob universe seems to be a completely legitimate force that coexists with physics, and somehow nobody questions it. The royal family is channeling this power to maintain order, protect the city, and presumably do all the flashy supernatural stuff that keeps a population convinced that monarchy is a good idea. And honestly, based on what we see of Atlantis later, it seems to be working pretty well for them. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Atlanteans aren't just passively enjoying their prosperity, they're actively creating. Specifically, they're crafting magical artifacts, and not like cute decorative pieces you'd find in a gift shop. We're talking genuinely powerful objects that can alter reality and channel enormous amounts of energy. The crown jewel of this collection, pun absolutely intended, is the Amulet of Atlantis. This thing shows up way later in the timeline, and it's still functioning perfectly, which tells you something about Atlantean craftsmanship. They built things to last, apparently for millions of years. The amulet itself is described in the show as the power source and protective mechanism for the entire city of Atlantis. Let me repeat that. The entire city. One amulet. It's simultaneously powering their infrastructure, and generating some kind of defensive barrier or protective field around the whole civilization. The engineering implications here are staggering. We're talking about a single artifact that's essentially a combination nuclear reactor and force field generator, except it runs on magic instead of physics, and it never needs maintenance. The Atlanteans just made this thing, plugged it into their city, and it worked for eons. Meanwhile, in the modern era, the Krusty Krab's cash register breaks if you look at it wrong. So clearly, some knowledge has been lost over time. What's particularly fascinating is that the show treats the amulet as both a technological device and a mystical object, and there's zero distinction made between those categories. It's magic, but it's also infrastructure. It's a religious or royal artifact, but it's also civic engineering. The Atlanteans apparently never developed the separation between science and sorcery that most civilizations eventually stumble into. To them, channeling magical energy through a crafted amulet to power a city is just how you do urban planning. Meanwhile, back in regular Bikini Bottom, which at this point is definitely not called that yet, the local population is developing their own culture. It's significantly less advanced than Atlantis, but they're making progress. Ancient Bikini Bottomites are creating simple forms of art and music, which we know about because archaeological evidence of this stuff apparently survives into the modern era. We're talking primitive paintings on rocks, basic percussion instruments made from shells, that kind of thing. It's the cultural equivalent of baby's first steps, but it matters because it establishes that artistic expression is basically hardwired into the DNA of this region. Bikini Bottom, even in ancient times, is producing artists and musicians. And speaking of artists, this is roughly when the first known ancestors of Squidward tentacles are crawling around the ocean floor. The show makes specific reference to Squidward having ancient ancestors, and based on the timeline, they'd be living during this period. These are primitive cephalopods, probably not even fully evolved yet, definitely not playing clarinet or appreciating interpretive dance, but they're there, they're surviving, and they're presumably already miserable, because being unhappy seems to be a genetic trait in Squidward's family line. Every single one of his ancestors we ever see is either suffering or about to suffer. So the Tentacles family has been having a bad time for literally millions of years. That's consistency. Now, at some point during this golden age, something happens to Atlantis. The city becomes isolated from the rest of the ocean world. The show never fully explains why this happens, and I genuinely don't know if it was a deliberate choice by the Atlanteans or some kind of accident or natural event. What we do know is that Atlantis goes from being a known civilization that presumably has contact with the outside world to being completely cut off. They're still there, still thriving behind their magical barriers, but nobody can reach them, and they're not reaching out. The isolation seems to be both physical and dimensional, like Atlantis phases slightly out of sync with regular reality. Later in the timeline, getting to Atlantis requires either ancient artifacts, specific magical knowledge, or just stumbling through the right portal at the right time. It's not a place you can just swim to anymore, even though it still technically exists in the ocean. The Atlanteans have effectively removed themselves from the normal flow of undersea civilization, and they seem to be completely fine with this arrangement. What's wild is that even after isolating themselves, the Atlanteans keep advancing. They're perfecting their technology, or magical technology, whatever we're calling it. Specifically, they're working on transportation systems, which in any other civilization would mean roads and vehicles. But this is Atlantis, so of course they're doing something weird. They develop what the show explicitly identifies as a bus, an Atlantean bus, a magical public transportation system for an isolated dimensional city that nobody can visit. They perfected a bus, And before you ask, yes, we see this bus later in the timeline. It's real, it works, and it's completely bizarre. It's simultaneously ancient and futuristic. It runs on no visible power source, and it apparently operates on a schedule despite Atlantis being cut off from time in any meaningful sense. The Atlanteans looked at their perfect magical civilization and thought, you know what this needs? Public transit. And then they made it happen. That's the level of civic planning we're dealing with. The bus thing is actually important because it shows that Atlantean society isn't stagnant. They're isolated, sure, but they're still innovating, still improving their infrastructure, still solving civic problems that probably don't even exist anymore because their city is already perfect. It's advancement for the sake of advancement. They've achieved post-scarcity, magical utopia, and they're still workshopping their public transportation. Honestly, it's kind of admirable. So now you've got this situation where Atlantis is hidden away in its own pocket dimension or whatever, completely isolated, running on magical artifacts, perfecting bus schedules that serve a population that can probably teleport. And the rest of the ocean has no idea what happened to them. But here's the thing, the legend survives, even though nobody can reach Atlantis, even though it's been cut off from the world. Stories about it spread throughout the ancient ocean. Tales of the advanced civilization, the magical artifacts, the wisdom of the Neptune kings. All of it becomes mythology. And that mythology persists. It gets passed down through generations, evolves into folklore, becomes the kind of story that ancient sea creatures tell around whatever the underwater equivalent of a campfire is. Atlantis transforms from a real place that you could theoretically visit into a legend, a myth, the ancient advanced civilization that may or may not have actually existed. Except it definitely did exist. It's just hiding. The legend spreads far enough and persists long enough that millions of years later, modern Bikini Bottomites still know the stories. Kids grow up hearing about Atlantis. It becomes part of the cultural background of the entire ocean. And the whole time, Atlantis is still there, still running, still perfect, completely unaware that they've become mythology. That's going to matter later, trust me. So we've established that the entire concept of Bikini Bottom existing is, well, a little unhinged from the jump. You've got this ancient, primordial soup of chaos and then, just poof, a city. But how did we get from prehistoric Plankton to pineapple under the sea? That, my friends, is where things get colonial. At some point, in what we can only loosely refer to as the colonial era, because honestly, the dating on this stuff is more fluid than a jellyfish, we meet a very familiar face, or rather, a very familiar ancestor of a familiar face. We're talking about Patchy the Pirate's ancestor, also named Patchy the Pirate. Yes, really. The writers, bless their hearts, decided that the family tree of a live-action host for a cartoon about talking sea creatures needed to be as convoluted as possible. So this original Patchy the Pirate, a bona fide swashbuckling buccaneer, was out there doing pirate things. What those pirate things entailed precisely, beyond sailing and presumably hoarding treasure, is never fully elaborated upon. Was he raiding other ships? Was he just really into maritime exploration? Did he have a parrot named Potty too? The canon is silent, which is frankly a travesty. We deserve to know the full, unvarnished history of the Patchy lineage. Anyway, this seafaring Patchy aboard his ship, the rather aptly named Salty Squid, somehow stumbled upon the very coordinates that would eventually become the bustling metropolis of Bikini Bottom. Now, you might be asking, how does a pirate ship presumably designed for surface travel land underwater? And to that, I genuinely have no idea. The logistics of this are never addressed. Did the ship sink? Was it a magical ship? Did he just, really want to explore the seabed? It's one of those things you just have to accept, like a sponge wearing pants. This pirate, this pioneer of the deep, lands his vessel on the shores of what was then an utterly uncharted, unnamed underwater territory. Imagine the scene. A wooden ship, barnacle encrusted, settling gently, or perhaps dramatically, cannon first, who knows, onto the sandy bottom, surrounded by, well, we'll get to what it was surrounded by. Once the salty squid had made its improbable descent and landing, Patchy the pirate and his crew, a motley assortment of presumably equally bewildered humans, or at least surface dwellers, began to explore. This wasn't just a quick peek and a treasure map drawing. This was a full-on boots on the ground, or rather, flippers on the sand if they had those, expedition into the unknown. They were charting new waters, literally. The sheer audacity of it, really. A bunch of air-breathing pirates just casually strolling around the seabed. Again, no explanation for how they were breathing, or how their clothes weren't instantly waterlogged, or how they were even moving with any semblance of grace in that kind of pressure. But that's the magic of it, isn't it? Suspension of disbelief is practically a prerequisite for entry into this universe. Naturally, exploring an uncharted underwater territory meant encountering indigenous marine life. And let me tell you, not all of them were thrilled to see a bunch of landlubbers, or in this case, surface lubbers, stomping around. The canon implies, and in some cases explicitly shows, that some of these early inhabitants were decidedly hostile. We're not talking about a gentle, hello, welcome to our home. We're talking about territorial disputes, probably some aggressive fin flapping, maybe even a few attempted spearings from particularly irate fish. It paints a picture of a rather tense initial encounter, a clash of cultures, if you will, between the established residents and these curious oxygen-dependent interlopers. It's a good reminder that even in a world of talking sponges, colonialism still has its rough edges. Despite the occasional, or perhaps frequent skirmishes with the locals, Patchy the pirate persevered. He and his crew established a temporary encampment. This wasn't a permanent structure, mind you, more like a glorified beach camp, but underwater. Think tents, maybe a campfire that somehow burned underwater. Again, don't ask me, I just report the law. And a general air of, we're not sure how long we're staying, but we're making ourselves comfortable. This encampment, however rudimentary, holds a significant place in the timeline. It marks the first known settlement in the area that would eventually become Bikini Bottom. It's the acorn from which the mighty oak of Krabby Patties would one day grow. Word, as it always does, began to spread. Tales of this new abundant underwater land, discovered by a rather eccentric pirate, reached the ears of other surface dwellers. Soon, early settlers, a mix of pioneers and adventurers, started to arrive. These weren't just pirates anymore. These were people looking for a fresh start, a new life, or perhaps just a really good clamming spot. They were drawn by what can only be described as the underwater equivalent of a gold rush, tales of abundant resources and new opportunities. Imagine the propaganda posters. Come to the deep, where the kelp is always green and the treasure flows like water. Except, underwater. It's a classic tale of frontier expansion, just with gills and fins instead of covered wagons. And so, with a growing population of intrepid and presumably magically breathing settlers, the town of Bikini Bottom was officially founded. The exact date is predictably murky. Was it when the first town hall was built? When the first street was paved with seashells? When someone finally decided to stop calling it Patchy's Underwater Camp and give it a proper name? The law doesn't specify, but the implication is that it was a communal effort, a coming together of these diverse and, again, inexplicably aquatic individuals to form a proper community. This wasn't just a collection of shanties anymore. This was a town. With a town came the need for infrastructure. The settlers, with remarkable efficiency and ingenuity, considering they were building underwater, established basic infrastructure. This included homes, which I can only assume were built from whatever sturdy materials they could find on the seabed, perhaps giant clamshells or reinforced coral, and, crucially, public spaces. We're talking about things like a town square, maybe a general store, perhaps even a rudimentary schoolhouse for the pioneer children who were, again, somehow breathing underwater. It's a testament to the sheer determination of these early settlers that they managed to construct a functioning society in such an alien environment. And then, the moment we've all been waiting for, the culinary cornerstone of Bikini Bottom, the first Krusty Krab-like establishment. It wasn't called the Krusty Krab, not yet. It was known as the Krusty Crew. A subtle but significant distinction. This was the primordial super fast food, the genesis of the greatest culinary invention known to the oceanic world. We don't know who founded it or what exactly was on the menu beyond the obvious and probably not yet perfected Krabby Patty, but it was there. It was serving something, and it was laying the groundwork for the gastronomical empire that would define an entire generation of sea creatures. The seeds of Mr. Krab's future obsession with money and his eventual triumph in the fast food industry were sown right here, in this humble, pioneering establishment. The sheer audacity of these early settlers to not only build a town underwater, but to immediately establish a restaurant speaks volumes about their priorities, and honestly, I respect it. You build a town, you get hungry. It's just good sense. The Krusty Crew, then, a decidedly less fancy operation than its modern iteration, served what can only be described as rudimentary seafood dishes to the burgeoning population. I mean, we're talking about a small wooden shack here, not the iconic, albeit dilapidated, pirate ship restaurant we all know and, well, no. It was less about the ambience and more about just getting something edible into the bellies of the pioneering fish and other assorted sea creatures. Think of it as the original, hyper-local, farm-to-table, or rather, ocean-to-table establishment. Long before anyone even knew what a farm was, let alone a table that wasn't just a flat rock. Now, as with any colonial expansion, early conflicts inevitably arose between these new settlers and some of the native marine inhabitants. You can't just waltz into someone's kelp forest and start building without expecting a few disagreements. I'm not saying there were full-blown wars, but let's just say there were some strongly worded debates about property lines and who got to chase which anchovy. The specifics are, predictably, a bit murky, lost to the annals of unrecorded history, but we can infer from later events that these were not always peaceful negotiations. Imagine trying to explain zoning laws to a grumpy giant clam. It probably didn't go well. To mitigate these squabbles and generally keep the peace, the settlers wisely decided to develop a rudimentary form of governance. Because as it turns out, a town full of independent-minded sea creatures, each with their own peculiar habits and desires, tends to devolve into chaos without some sort of framework. This wasn't exactly a fully fledged democracy with town hall meetings and filibusters, but it was a start. Think more along the lines of a communal agreement on basic rules like don't eat your neighbour's pet sea snail, or try not to accidentally flood the guy living downstream. Simple but effective for the time. This early governance eventually led to the election of the first mayor of Bikini Bottom. Yes, an actual mayor, with a sash and everything, probably. This individual, whose name is sadly lost to the swirling currents of time, or perhaps never recorded in the first place, because who had time for record keeping when you were busy building a town, oversaw the town's initial, crucial growth. This wasn't just about keeping the streets clean, which, let's be honest, is a pretty low bar underwater, but about establishing infrastructure, designating communal areas, and generally trying to make sure the nascent settlement didn't just drift apart. It was a big job, I imagine, especially when half your constituents communicate through interpretive dance, and the other half just want to eat plankton in peace. As the town stabilised, its economy began to develop. Naturally, this revolved primarily around fishing and trade. I mean, what else are you going to do when you're literally surrounded by fish? They weren't exactly mining for rare earth elements down there. The Krusty crew, with its groundbreaking, for the time, seafood offerings, was a central pillar of this economy. But beyond that, there was a brisk trade in kelp, coral, and whatever other ocean floor sundries could be bartered. Imagine a bustling marketplace, but instead of fresh produce, it's just a lot of slightly damp iridescent shells and maybe a particularly shiny piece of driftwood. The currency? I genuinely have no idea what they used. Probably shiny pebbles or maybe just a really good handshake. It was during this period that the first jellyfish fields were discovered. Now, for those unfamiliar, jellyfish fields are exactly what they sound like. Vast expanses of the ocean floor, absolutely teeming with jellyfish. And not just any jellyfish, but the kind that are perfect for jellyfishing, which, if you've been paying attention, is a popular pastime in Bikini Bottom. This discovery was a game changer. It provided not only a source of entertainment, but also, presumably, a source of jelly. Jellyfishing became an integral part of the culture, a way for the early inhabitants to unwind, connect with nature, and maybe get a little stung in the process. It's like their version of a Saturday afternoon picnic, but with more tentacles and less ants. And because no good thing can exist without someone trying to capitalise on it, or more accurately, compete with it, the original chum bucket-like establishment, the Chum Cauldron, opened its doors. This was the nascent stage of the eternal rivalry that would define much of Bikini Bottom's culinary landscape. The Chum Cauldron, much like its modern successor, was attempting to compete directly with the Krusty crew. They probably thought, hey, everyone likes seafood, right? We'll just make our own version. The problem, and this is a recurring theme, is that the Chum Cauldron's food was widely considered unappetizing. And by unappetizing, I mean probably actively repulsive. We're talking about chum, folks, the stuff you throw out to attract bigger fish. It's not exactly gourmet fare. So, while the Krusty crew was serving up its rudimentary, but at least edible seafood, the Chum Cauldron was slinging, well, chum. This immediately established a long-standing rivalry, a culinary Cold War that continues to this very day. It set the precedent, one side making something vaguely palatable, the other side making something that would probably clear a room faster than a rogue sea urchin. This foundational culinary feud, born in the colonial era, would echo through the ages, shaping the very flavour of Bikini Bottom itself. It's genuinely impressive how quickly they locked into their respective roles, even back then. You'd think someone would have tried a different business model, but no. Chum it was and chum it remained. This early ill-fated venture solidified the idea that some things are just destined to be less than delicious. So we have a growing town, a rudimentary government, a blossoming economy, and the seeds of a culinary war that would span generations. It's a surprisingly robust foundation for a town built on the ocean floor, isn't it? The sheer tenacity of these early settlers, trying to make a life for themselves, despite the constant threat of bad food and grumpy giant clams, is truly something to behold. They were laying the groundwork, quite literally, for everything that was to come. And while we don't have all the details, the broad strokes paint a picture of a bustling, if slightly chaotic, frontier settlement. It really makes you wonder how they even managed to organise a mayoral election when half the population probably couldn't agree on what constituted a valid ballot. But they did it. They built Bikini Bottom, brick by metaphorical brick, and chum bucket by chum bucket. This era, then, is less about specific, named events and more about the slow, steady grind of pioneering life. It's about the establishment of norms, the forging of rivalries, and the discovery of leisure activities like jellyfishing, which again is just such a wonderfully absurd concept. It's the kind of thing you'd expect from a town founded by a bunch of fish. The entire colonial period is a testament to the resilience and, frankly, the questionable taste of the early inhabitants. They ate whatever the Krusty crew served, and they actively avoided whatever the chum cauldron was dishing out. Some things, it seems, never change, and that, in a nutshell, brings us through the foundational period, where the very bedrock of Bikini Bottom society was laid. It's a period of discovery, conflict, and the surprisingly quick establishment of a fast food rivalry that would become legendary. It makes you wonder, though, what other bizarre culinary experiments were attempted before they settled on chum as their primary offering. Did anyone try serving mashed kelp, or perhaps sun-dried plankton? The possibilities are horrifyingly endless. The fact that chum won out speaks volumes about the early culinary landscape of Bikini Bottom. Truly a dark age for taste buds. This initial period, filled with its trials and triumphs, set the stage for the more structured, if equally chaotic, developments that would follow. The basic tenets of Bikini Bottom life, the community spirit, the love of jellyfishing, and the eternal struggle between two competing eateries were all firmly established during this time. It's a surprisingly rich tapestry of early history for a town that's mostly known for a talking sponge. Next up, we're going to dive into the truly ancient history, the stuff that predates even these colonial efforts, and then we'll finally get to some of the more recognisable, albeit still very old, figures in Bikini Bottom's past. What did they use as currency back then? How did they decide who got to be mayor? And did anyone ever actually like the chum cauldron's food, even ironically? For the next video, I'm thinking about either the incredibly convoluted lore of the Elder Scrolls series, the surprisingly deep history of Kirby, or maybe we finally tackle the absolute madness that is the Kingdom Hearts timeline. Let me know what you think. So Bikini Bottom is founded, right? And things are, happening. But we need to talk about some people now. Specifically, a certain Krab. Around the mid-20th century, give or take a few decades because the timeline is, shall we say, flexible. When it comes to specific birth dates, a little crab named Eugene H. Krabs enters the world. And from what we can piece together, his childhood was, well, it wasn't exactly opulent. We're talking humble beginnings here, which, if you know anything about Mr. Krabs, explains a lot. He didn't grow up with a silver spatula in his claw, that's for sure. This early exposure to, let's call it, economic efficiency, deeply ingrained his lifelong passion for money, and more importantly, for keeping money. Every penny pinched, every dime saved, it all traces back to these formative years where, I imagine, every meal was a strategic victory, and every toy a luxurious fantasy. The writers really leaned into this, making his entire character a walking, talking, money-grubbing testament to his impoverished origins. It's almost poetic in a deeply unsettling way. Now, during his schooling days, Eugene wasn't exactly the most popular kid in the kelp forest. He was, by all accounts, a bit of an outcast. And who was right there with him in the social Siberia? None other than Sheldon J. Plankton. Yes, that Plankton. The two of them, the future arch-nemeses, were once inseparable. Can you imagine? It's like finding out Lex Luthor and Superman used to swap juice boxes in kindergarten. They were both picked on, both a little weird, both definitely not fitting into the traditional Bikini Bottom high school hierarchy. I picture them huddled together in the cafeteria, sharing a single, slightly stale Krabby Patty, dreaming of a better, richer future. Their bond, forged in the fires of shared unpopularity, was surprisingly strong. They understood each other in a way no one else did. They were the dynamic duo of the downtrodden, the Bonnie and Clyde of the bullied, and what brought them even closer was a shared, burning ambition. Money. Oh, the money. They both wanted it desperately. They wanted success, recognition, and let's be honest, probably a little revenge on all the popular kids who made their lives miserable. This mutual obsession with wealth became the cornerstone of their early friendship. It wasn't about fame or power, or even making the world a better place. It was purely about the cold, hard cash, which again makes perfect sense for both of them, given what they become. It's almost too neat, isn't it? Like the writers knew exactly where they were going with this from day one. Or maybe they just got lucky. I genuinely have no idea. So with their shared love of money and a burning desire to escape their outcast status, Eugene and Plankton decided the best way to achieve their dreams was naturally through food. Specifically, a burger. They figured, hey, everyone eats, right? If we make the best burger, we'll be rich. Simple logic, really. They pooled their meager resources, probably a few sand dollars, and some lint they found in their pockets, and set about creating the ultimate culinary masterpiece. This wasn't just about a recipe, it was about their future, their escape, their entire worldview distilled into a patty and a bun. They experimented, they tinkered, they probably argued a lot even then about the best way to chop a pickle. The kitchen, I imagine, was a chaotic mess of ambitious dreams and questionable ingredients. They probably thought they were on the cusp of greatness. Two culinary prodigies about to revolutionize the fast food industry. The problem? Their initial burger recipe was, to put it mildly, a disaster. A catastrophic, stomach-churning health hazard of a disaster. It was so bad, in fact, that it caused illness to anyone unfortunate enough to taste it. We're not talking about a little indigestion here. We're talking full-on, call the paramedics level sickness. Imagine the scene. Their first taste testers, probably some unsuspecting classmates, they lured in with promises of free food, clutching their stomachs, turning green, and probably vowing never to trust Eugene or Plankton again. The dream of riches, of success, of escaping their social purgatory, all went up in a puff of noxious, burger-induced fumes. It was a spectacular failure, a complete and utter flop that shattered their youthful optimism. And this, my friends, is where the cracks in their friendship truly began to show. The failure of their magnum opus, this terrible, awful burger, became the catalyst for their eventual falling out. They started blaming each other, naturally. It was your idea to add the extra anchovy paste. No, it was your fault for using expired kelp. The arguments escalated, fueled by disappointment, frustration, and probably a lingering nausea from their own creation. The burger, meant to unite them and launch them to stardom, instead tore them apart. The dream died, and with it, their friendship. It's a classic origin story, really. The hero and villain starting out as friends, only to be driven apart by a single, catastrophic event. In this case, that event was a truly awful burger. After the burger debacle and the bitter end of his friendship with Plankton, Eugene needed a change of scenery, a fresh start, and probably a way to forget the taste of that abominable patty. So he did what any self-respecting, financially motivated, slightly traumatized Krab would do. He joined the Navy. Yes, Mr. Krabs, the penny-pinching proprietor of the Krusty Krab, was once a proud member of the seafaring military. And not just any role, mind you. He served as a cook. The irony is, well, it's not lost on anyone, is it? The Krab, whose first culinary venture was a disaster, goes on to cook for an entire naval fleet. I'm choosing to believe he got significantly better at it, or at least that naval standards for food weren't particularly high back then. He travelled the world, or at least the ocean, experiencing different cultures, and I'm sure picking up a few tricks of the trade, both culinary and financial. This period of his life is crucial, shaping him into the shrewd, disciplined, and surprisingly capable individual he would become. It wasn't just about cooking, it was about structure, about responsibility, about learning to operate within a system, even if that system involved feeding hundreds of hungry sailors. During his time in the Navy, Eugene earned himself a rather fitting nickname, Armour Abs Krabs. Now, this wasn't just some clever moniker plucked out of thin air. It was a testament to his sheer physical toughness. We're talking about a crab with abs so hard, so well defined, they were practically armour. He was, by all accounts, a force to be reckoned with, a crab built like a tank. This detail often gets overlooked, but it's important. It shows that before he became the somewhat portly, money-obsessed restaurateur we know, Mr. Krabs was a physically imposing figure. He wasn't just smart, he was strong. He could take a hit and probably dish one out too. This physical prowess, combined with his burgeoning culinary skills and his innate business acumen, made him a formidable presence in the Navy. It also explains why, even in his later years, he still possesses a surprising amount of strength when he needs it. You don't just lose armour abs overnight, you know. That kind of physique takes dedication, discipline, and probably a lot of push-ups. Or, you know, just being a crab. The writers really wanted us to know that Krabs was not just some soft, greedy old man. He had a past, a history, of being a tough guy. It adds a layer to his character that you might not expect from someone whose main goal in life is to save a nickel. It's a subtle reminder that even the most seemingly one-note characters in Bikini Bottom have depth, even if that depth is mostly made of muscle and a burning desire for cash. We'll get to how he uses those abs later, trust me. And it's this incredibly formative period, this crucible of naval service, where we see the final terrifying crystallization of Eugene H. Krabs as we know him. He's already got the money thing going on, obviously, but the Navy just supercharges it. It's not just about saving a buck anymore. It's about maximizing every single resource, every single scrap, every single opportunity for profit, no matter how small, no matter how ethically dubious. He learns resourcefulness, sure, but it's the kind of resourcefulness that makes you wonder if the quartermaster ever checked his pockets after Krabs left the supply depot. Seriously, the man is a walking, talking, claw-pinching testament to the idea that necessity is the mother of invention, especially when that invention involves squeezing every last drop of value out of a situation. The Navy, with its strict hierarchies and limited provisions, just hammered this home. He's not just learning to cook, he's learning to cook efficiently. We're talking about a guy who could probably stretch a single kelp noodle into a 5-course meal for the entire mess hall, and then charge them for the privilege. He's gaining extensive experience with food preparation, but it's not for the love of culinary arts, it's for the love of not spending money. Every meal is an exercise in cost-benefit analysis. How little can I spend to make this palatable? How much can I charge for it once it's prepared? It's a terrifying thought, honestly. And this isn't just some vague, off-screen training montages. We see glimpses of his travels too. At some point, probably during shore leave or perhaps even after his service, but still very much a young man, he somehow ends up at the Salty Spittoon. Now, for those of you who've somehow managed to avoid this particular dive, the Salty Spittoon is not exactly a place for the faint of heart. It's the roughest, toughest establishment in Bikini Bottom, a place where even the bouncer has bouncers. To get in, you have to prove you're tough enough. We've seen SpongeBob try and fail spectacularly, almost getting himself turned into a human pretzel just for thinking about stepping inside. Yet young Mr. Krabs, the same guy who later freaks out about a single penny, somehow manages to not only enter, but seemingly survive the experience. I genuinely have no idea what his tough enough story was. Did he threaten to sue them for every last drop of spilled grog? Did he just stare down the bouncer until the poor guy felt financially intimidated? Did he simply refuse to pay the cover charge and somehow, through sheer stubbornness, they let him in? the mind boggles. It's a brief, almost throwaway detail, but it speaks volumes about the kind of grit, or perhaps just sheer, unadulterated cheapness that defined his early years. He's not just a penny pincher, he's a survivor, and the Navy just polished that survival instinct to a razor-sharp edge. His military service isn't just about cooking and travel, though. It's the ultimate boot camp for his burgeoning frugality. Every single day is a lesson in making do with less, in stretching a dollar until it screams, and then stretching it some more. He sees waste, and it offends him on a deeply spiritual level. He sees inefficiency, and it ignites a burning desire to optimize, to streamline, to cut costs wherever humanly or crustaceanly possible. This isn't just a character trait anymore, it's a fundamental operating principle. The Navy teaches him about discipline, about structure, about the value of hard work and resourcefulness. But all of these lessons are filtered through his unique, money-obsessed lens. Hard work isn't just good for its own sake, it's good because it saves you from paying someone else to do it. Resourcefulness isn't about ingenuity, it's about not having to buy new supplies. It's a beautiful, terrifying synergy of personality and environment. So, he serves his time. He survives, probably with more than a few harrowing tales he'd never tell, because who has time for storytelling when there's money to be made? And then finally, he returns from service. He's a changed Krab, certainly. He's hardened, he's resourceful, and he's got a single, laser-focused goal: to make money. Lots and lots of money. His entrepreneurial ventures begin almost immediately. He's not the type to sit around and collect unemployment. He's got his Navy severance pay, a tidy sum that, for any other person, might be a down payment on a house or a nice vacation. For Mr. Krabs, it's seed money. It's the fuel for his grand capitalistic ambitions. And what does he do with this hard-earned, meticulously saved, probably at least partially embezzled severance pay? He buys a dilapidated retirement home. Yes, you heard that right. Not a sleek, modern restaurant space. Not a prime piece of real estate. A rundown, probably mouldy, definitely creaky old building called the Rusty Krab. I mean, the name alone should have been a red flag, but to Krabs, it's not a liability, it's an opportunity. It's cheap. It's got character, red structural damage. And most importantly, it's his. He sees potential where others see a money pit. This is peak Krabs, right here. He's not afraid of a little elbow grease, especially if that elbow grease saves him from paying a contractor. He converts the Rusty Krab into a restaurant. This isn't some overnight HGTV-style renovation. This is a slow, painstaking process, probably done almost entirely by himself, with materials he found or acquired at rock-bottom prices. The initial days are, predictably, a struggle. The Rusty Krab is not exactly a beacon of culinary excellence. It's a former retirement home. The ambience is probably still ode to old people and despair. He's trying to attract customers, but let's be real, who wants to eat in a place that still smells faintly of prune juice and bingo night? He's probably serving whatever he learned to cook in the Navy, which, while resourceful, probably wasn't winning any Michelin stars. He's struggling, he's desperate, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it looks like his grand entrepreneurial dream might just be a rusty, mouldy bust. But this is Mr. Krabs we're talking about. He doesn't give up. He's got that naval discipline, that ingrained resourcefulness, and a deep-seated fear of losing money. He tinkers, he experiments, he probably goes through countless failed recipes, each one a testament to his unwillingness to spend money on proper ingredients. And then at some point, in a moment of either pure genius or desperate accident, he perfects the Krabby Patty recipe. Now, the Krabby Patty, oh, the Krabby Patty. This isn't just a sandwich, folks. This is the cornerstone of an empire. This is the culinary equivalent of the Holy Grail. The secret formula that fuels Bikini Bottom's economy and drives its most insane plotlines. The recipe itself is shrouded in mystery, a closely guarded secret that Mr. Krabs would sooner part with a limb than reveal. We know it involves a patty, lettuce, onions, cheese, pickles, mustard, ketchup, and secret formula. What's in the secret formula? I genuinely have no idea. Is it love? Is it a pinch of illegal substances? Is it just really good MSG? The show deliberately keeps it vague, and honestly, that's half the fun. It's the ultimate MacGuffin, a source of endless conflict and motivation. The perfection of the Krabby Patty is the turning point. Suddenly, the rusty Krab isn't just a dilapidated retirement home anymore. It's the place to eat. The aroma of those perfectly grilled patties wafts through the water, drawing in customers like moths to a flame. The lines start forming, the cash register starts ringing, and Mr. Krab's eyes, already dollar sign shaped, probably expand to the size of dinner plates. The success of the Krusty Krab, as it's now known, is instantaneous and overwhelming. He's found his niche, his golden goose, his money-making machine. And with that success, the cycle is complete. The frugal, resourceful, money-obsessed Krab forged in the fires of naval service now has the ultimate tool to achieve his dreams. He's no longer just saving money, he's making it, hand over fist, one delicious, mysterious Krabby Patty at a time. He's an entrepreneur, a restaurateur, a titan of industry, all thanks to a secret formula and an unwavering commitment to never ever spending more than he absolutely has to. The Krusty Krab isn't just a restaurant, it's a monument to his singular, terrifying vision. And this, my friends, is where our running tally of Krabby Patty-related incidents begins. We're at 1 currently, the creation of the patty itself, but trust me, that number is going to skyrocket faster than a rocket-powered spatula. We'll get to that, trust me. So with the Krusty Krab now a booming success, what's next for our intrepid Krab? Well, he needs staff, obviously. He can't run an entire restaurant empire by himself, even if he'd probably try to if he could. And this is where we meet some of the most iconic and arguably most long-suffering characters in the entire series. But before we get there, we need to talk about the Krusty Krab's most enduring rival, the eternal thorn in Krabs' side, the bane of his existence, the one and only Plankton. Because you can't have a hero without a villain, and in Bikini Bottom, the villain is usually just as obsessed with food and money as the hero. It's a strange symbiotic relationship, really. So, we've established that Mr. Krabs, a creature whose entire existence seems to revolve around the acquisition of cold, hard cash, didn't just spring forth from the ocean floor, fully formed with a cash register for a heart. No, he had a whole life before that, a life that, frankly, explains a lot. And it all really kicks off, or at least the part that directly leads to the Krusty Krab in the late 20th century. This is when Eugene H. Krabs, fresh out of whatever bizarre, barnacle-encrusted Krab high school he attended, decides to join the Navy, or more accurately, he's in the Navy. The canon is a little squishy on the exact recruitment process, but he's there. And this, my friends, is where the magic, or rather, the madness begins. Now you might think a Krab in the Navy would be, I don't know, a submariner or maybe a deckhand. But no, Mr. Krabs, in a stroke of narrative genius that only SpongeBob can pull off, finds himself in the galley. He's a cook, a naval chef, and it's here, amidst the clatter of pots and pans, the smell of, well, whatever naval food smells like, that he first truly hones his culinary skills. More importantly, this is also where he discovers his profound, almost spiritual, connection to money. I'm not entirely sure how cooking for the Navy translates directly into a love of money, but knowing Mr. Krabs, he probably found a way to charge his fellow sailors for extra rations or something. Maybe he ran a black market for grog. It's not explicitly stated, but it's the only logical conclusion for a character whose avarice is practically a superpower. He's learning to cook, yes, but he's also learning the value of a dollar, and more importantly, the value of his dollar. This isn't just a job for him, it's an education in the art of the hustle. He's probably counting every penny, every nickel, every doubloon he earns, meticulously charting its growth, probably even before he knows what he's going to do with it. It's a primal urge, almost instinctual. Eventually, Mr. Krabs' distinguished, or at least completed, naval career comes to an end. He receives an honourable discharge. Again, the specifics are a bit fuzzy. Was he a hero? Did he just serve his time? We genuinely have no idea. But he's out. And you'd think, with his newfound cooking skills and his burgeoning love for money, he'd immediately parlay that into some kind of entrepreneurial venture. But no. Life, as it often does, throws a curveball. Or perhaps a cannonball. Mr. Krabs experiences a period of unemployment and significant financial hardship after leaving the Navy. This is crucial. It's not just a brief lull, it's a genuine struggle. He's not living the high life, counting his naval earnings. He's down on his luck, probably scrounging for whatever meagre scraps he can find. This period of destitution, I believe, hardens his resolve and cements his obsession with money. It's not just a preference anymore, it's a survival mechanism. He's seen the bottom and he's decided he never wants to go back. This is the crucible that forges the penny-pinching, profit-driven Mr. Krabs we all know and, well, tolerate. This is where he learns the true meaning of scarcity, and it instills in him a deep-seated fear of ever being without. It's a trauma, really, a financial trauma that shapes his entire future. You can almost picture him, living in some dingy, dilapidated coral shack, counting grains of sand, dreaming of a future where every grain is a gold coin. But even in his darkest hour, Mr. Krabs, ever the opportunist, sees a glimmer of possibility. With his meagre savings, probably every last cent he managed to squirrel away from his naval days and whatever odd jobs he could find during his unemployment, he makes a rather peculiar purchase. He buys a rundown retirement home. A retirement home. Not a restaurant, not a diner, but a place where elderly fish presumably spent their twilight years playing bingo and complaining about the quality of the kelp. This establishment is called the Rusty Krab. The name itself is a testament to its dilapidated state. It's not just rusty, it's probably falling apart, infested with sea roaches, and generally an eyesore. But Mr. Krabs, with his unique blend of optimism and sheer stubbornness, sees potential. Or perhaps he simply sees a building he can afford. It's probably the cheapest piece of real estate in Bikini Bottom, a fixer-upper of epic proportions. And so the extensive renovation process begins. This isn't a quick paint job and new signage. This is a full-blown gutting and rebuilding. He's transforming a retirement home, a place designed for quiet contemplation and early bedtimes, into a bustling eatery. Imagine the structural changes required. The plumbing, the kitchen facilities, the dining area. It's a monumental undertaking, especially for someone who, by all accounts, is still struggling financially. He's probably doing most of the work himself, hauling planks of driftwood, hammering nails with his claws, probably even bartering for materials. It's a true rags to riches story, but the rags part is very, very real here. This is not some overnight success, it's years of toil and sweat, probably a lot of pinched claws and muttered curses. Now this is where it gets interesting, and frankly, a little bit absurd. During these extensive renovations, Mr. Krabs stumbles upon something that will change the culinary landscape of Bikini Bottom forever. He discovers a secret ingredient. The canon is, predictably, vague on the specifics of this discovery. Was it hidden in the walls, under the floorboards? Did he accidentally knock over a jar of something mysterious in the old pantry? We don't know. What we do know is that this ingredient whatever its origin, has the magical property of enhancing his burger recipe. It's not just a seasoning, it's a game changer. It elevates his already decent naval cooking skills to an entirely new level. It's the spark that ignites the culinary genius, or at least the culinary success of Mr. Krabs. This isn't just a discovery, it's an epiphany. It's the missing piece of the puzzle. With this newfound ingredient in hand, Mr. Krabs meticulously develops the secret Krabby Patty formula. This isn't just a recipe, it's a sacred text. He's not just throwing ingredients together, he's crafting an iconic sandwich, a culinary masterpiece that will eventually become the most sought-after food in the entire ocean. He experiments, he refines, he probably tastes hundreds of variations until he gets it just right. The Krabby Patty isn't an accident. It's the culmination of his naval training, his financial struggles, his entrepreneurial spirit, and a healthy dose of serendipitous discovery. It's the perfect blend of flavors, textures, and that mysterious, secret ingredient. And because it's Mr. Krabs, you can bet he's already envisioning the dollar signs that will come with every single patty sold. The smell of success is probably just as intoxicating to him as the smell of the Krabby Patty itself. Finally, after all the renovations, all the recipe development, all the dreaming, the Krusty Krab is ready to open its doors. But before the grand opening, Mr. Krabs, ever the businessman, needs staff. So he hires his very first employee. And who is this pivotal figure in the history of the Krusty Krab? A short-lived and utterly forgettable fry cook. That's it. That's all we know. No name, no backstory, no distinguishing features. Just a placeholder, a warm body to flip patties until the real talent arrives. It's a testament to how humble the beginnings of the Krusty Krab truly were. He's not hiring a culinary genius, he's hiring someone, anyone, to help him get this venture off the ground. It speaks volumes about the initial shoestring budget and the sheer desperation to get things moving. The Krusty Krab opens its doors, and you'd think, with such a revolutionary burger, it would be an instant sensation. But no, the initial reception is, shall we say, underwhelming. The restaurant struggles to attract customers. Why? Well, for one, it's still a converted, probably still a bit rusty, retirement home. Its exterior is unappealing. It's not exactly drawing in the crowds with its curb appeal. And it has no reputation. No one knows about the Krabby Patty yet. It's a new, unknown entity in a sea of established eateries. It's a classic case of build it and they might come eventually. Early customers are few and far between. Mr. Krabs is probably standing at the door, trying to wave people in, offering discounts, practically begging for business. This leads to significant financial concerns for him. He's poured his life savings, his sweat, his tears into this place, and it's not immediately paying off. This period is probably just as stressful, if not more so, than his initial unemployment. He's invested everything, and the return is minimal. He's probably staring at his empty dining room, calculating the losses, wondering if he's made the biggest mistake of his life. The dream of the Krabby Patty empire feels a million miles away. He's back to counting pennies, but this time, they're pennies he's losing. It's a stark reminder that even the most brilliant ideas need time and a little bit of luck to truly flourish. And this, my friends, is where the story of the Krusty Krab truly begins to take shape, with a struggling entrepreneur, a secret formula, and a whole lot of empty tables. And this, my friends, is where the Krusty Krab really starts to take shape. We're still firmly in the late 20th century here, as Krabs, ever the frugal entrepreneur, begins to implement the cost-cutting measures that would become his signature. And by cost-cutting, I mean a philosophy so deeply ingrained it would make a venture capitalist blush. He wasn't just looking for deals, he was actively avoiding expense at every turn. Think about it. A restaurant in a town with a relatively stable economy. And this guy is sourcing ingredients that are suspiciously inexpensive. We're talking ingredients that, if you were to actually analyse them, might raise an eyebrow or two. But hey, it works for him. He also kept his staff count at an absolute minimum, which, spoiler alert, is a recurring theme. For most of the Krusty Krab's operational history, you're looking at a grand total of 2 employees, not counting Krabs himself. 2. For a popular, bustling establishment, it's a miracle the place even functions, let alone thrives. This relentless focus on efficiency and profit maximization wasn't just about saving a few bucks here and there. It was a foundational principle. Krabs was essentially pioneering the fast food model, but with an even more aggressive approach to overhead. He refined his processes, streamlined everything, probably timed how long it took SpongeBob to flip a patty, then shaved off a second or two. Every single decision, every little tweak was ultimately aimed at widening that profit margin. It's almost admirable in a terrifying, capitalistic sort of way. He was building an empire, brick by penny, and the foundation was laid on a bedrock of extreme financial conservatism. Now, despite all these unconventional business practices, something truly remarkable happened. The Krusty Krab, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, began to gain a following, a small but fiercely loyal following. And it wasn't because of the ambience or the customer service or the spacious dining area. It was the Krabby Patty. This unassuming, seemingly simple sandwich, made with those suspiciously cheap ingredients, somehow managed to be utterly delicious. It's one of those things where the canon just insists. It's good, and you have to accept it, even if the logistics are a little fuzzy. How can something made with such a tight budget be so universally beloved? I genuinely have no idea, but it is. It's a culinary enigma, a paradox wrapped in a sesame seed bun. And because it was so good, because it was so unique, word of mouth started to spread. Not like wildfire, not instantly, but a steady, persistent hum throughout Bikini Bottom. Someone would try a Krabby Patty, tell a friend, that friend would try one, tell 2 more friends, and so on. It was organic growth, the kind that money can't buy, and it was all thanks to this singular, iconic menu item. The Krabby Patty became a legend in its own right, a culinary landmark in a town full of bizarre attractions. People would specifically seek out the Krusty Krab just for a taste of this mysterious, delicious sandwich. It was around this time that Krabs, seeing the burgeoning success, decided to solidify his establishment's identity. He officially christened it the Krusty Krab. The name itself is, well, it's certainly an art name. It's memorable, I'll give him that. And he developed the branding, the iconic anchor logo, the general nautical theme. He was creating a brand, a recognizable entity that people would associate directly with those delicious, Krabby Patties. It wasn't just a shack anymore. It was the Krusty Krab, a place with a distinct identity and, more importantly, a distinct product. This period, this late 20th century blossoming of the Krusty Krab, also marks the true genesis of one of the most enduring and frankly exhausting rivalries in all of Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs versus Sheldon J. Plankton. Plankton, a microscopic copepod with a giant brain and an even bigger inferiority complex, operates the Chum Bucket, a restaurant directly across the street from the Krusty Krab. And let me tell you, the Chum Bucket is the antithesis of the Krusty Krab in every conceivable way, except for the fact that they both serve food. Plankton's food is universally reviled, a fact that he seems to be in denial about, or perhaps he just doesn't care, as long as he can get his hands on the real prize, the Krabby Patty formula. Their rivalry isn't just about competition, it's a deep-seated, almost existential conflict. Plankton's entire life's ambition revolves around stealing that formula, and Krabs' entire life's ambition revolves around protecting it. It's a constant, never-ending battle of wits, gadgets, and increasingly absurd schemes. Plankton's attempts to steal the formula become a daily, sometimes hourly, occurrence, cementing their adversarial relationship for decades to come. This isn't just a business rivalry, it's a personal vendetta, a clash of titans, albeit very small titans. Despite the constant threat of Plankton's nefarious plans, the Krusty Krab continued its upward trajectory. It eventually found widespread success, transcending its humble beginnings to become the popular eatery in Bikini Bottom. It wasn't just a local spot anymore, it was a destination. People would flock there day in and day out for their Krabby Patty fix. It became a cultural touchstone, a place where everyone in town, from the most ordinary fish to the most eccentric sea creature, would gather. This success, of course, only fueled Mr. Krabs' already insatiable love for money. He wasn't just making a living, he was accumulating wealth, building a veritable Scrooge McDuck-esque vault of cash. And the Krusty Krab was his golden goose, laying golden Krabby Patties, if you will. So by the end of this foundational period, the Krusty Krab was firmly established as a profitable business, a money-making machine designed to indulge Krabs' every pecuniary whim. It was more than just a restaurant, it was a monument to his financial acumen, a testament to his ability to turn a simple sandwich into a goldmine. And it wasn't just profitable, it was a fixture in the community. Everyone knew the Krusty Krab. Everyone knew the Krabby Patty. It was known for its delicious, if mysteriously sourced, patties and its consistently cheap prices, a combination that proved irresistible to the denizens of Bikini Bottom. It was the place to go, the place to be seen, the place to eat. And it was all built on the back of a secret formula, a microscopic rival, and an owner whose love for money was only surpassed by his love for a good bargain. The question then becomes, how does a place like this, with such a unique owner, continue to operate and even flourish for so long? What exactly is in that Krabby Patty? Why does Plankton never just try to make his own, equally delicious, if not superior, sandwich? And how does one Coke pod manage to afford so many ridiculously complex contraptions for stealing a recipe? We'll get to some of that, trust me, as we move into the next phase of Bikini Bottom's history, where the Krusty Krab solidifies its place as an institution and its employees start to, well, exist. Next up, we'll dive into the early days of SpongeBob's employment, the genesis of Squidward's misery, and the continued, baffling existence of the chum bucket. So we've established that the universe is a chaotic, sentient, and frankly, quite hungry entity, and that Bikini Bottom itself is a place where the laws of physics are more like suggestions. Which, is important context because at some point in the late 20th century, a tiny, absorbent, and apparently porous creature named SpongeBob SquarePants was born. And yes, he's a sponge, not a kitchen sponge, not a sea sponge in the traditional sense, but a SpongeBob sponge, which is its own classification, I guess. The writers genuinely seem to waffle on this, sometimes implying he's a natural sea sponge, other times he's clearly, definitively, a cleaning implement. I don't know, maybe he's both. Maybe his species evolved to clean. It's a mystery. Anyway, he's born to Harold and Margaret SquarePants, who are, to put it mildly, a couple of characters. Harold, with his perpetually furrowed brow, and Margaret with her very square pants. It's a family trait, apparently. They raise young SpongeBob in a pineapple house. Now, this is a detail that I always found fascinating because, as we'll get to later, SpongeBob's iconic pineapple house is a very specific type of pineapple. It's a 2-story, fully furnished, sentient, if you believe the rumours, pineapple. But for his childhood, it's just a pineapple house, which implies there are multiple pineapple houses, or that the specific iconic one is just his childhood home that he never left. The lore is a bit hazy on whether Harold and Margaret lived in the pineapple house or a pineapple house, or if they just moved SpongeBob into the pineapple house later. I'm choosing to believe they raised him in our pineapple house, because the idea of a whole neighbourhood of pineapple houses is just delightful. And it's in Bikini Bottom, which, as we discussed, is located deep in the Pacific Ocean. Specifically, it's under an atoll called Bikini Atoll. Yes, that's Bikini Atoll, the one famous for other things, which again raises some questions about the general health and well-being of the marine life there. But hey, they seem fine, mostly. SpongeBob as a child experiences what we can only describe as a typical, if slightly surreal, childhood. He attends school, though we don't get many specifics about his early education beyond the fact that he was, predictably, an extremely enthusiastic student. He develops his relentlessly optimistic personality during this time, which frankly is a superpower in itself. Imagine being that consistently cheerful. It's exhausting just thinking about it. He's the kind of kid who probably found joy in, watching paint dry. If paint could dry underwater, he probably cheered for the paint. Go, paint, go. Then, at some point, he enrolls in Mrs. Puff's boating school. Now, this is where things get interesting, because SpongeBob's inability to drive a boatmobile is like his defining character trait. And it starts early. He's a menace behind the wheel, even as a kid. He crashes, he burns, he causes untold property damage. Mrs. Puff, bless her heart, tries. She really truly tries, but SpongeBob is just uniquely bad at driving. It's not for lack of trying either. He studies, he practices, he even gets his license for a brief glorious moment before it's inevitably revoked. It's a running gag that never really stops running, and it's rooted firmly in his childhood. It's almost like a cosmic joke that the most earnest, well-meaning creature in Bikini Bottom is also the most dangerous on the road. The sheer collateral damage he causes over the years from his driving escapades is truly staggering. We're talking multiple boatmobiles, entire buildings, even parts of the ocean floor. And yet he persists. His optimism is unshakable, even in the face of repeated spectacular failure. You have to admire it, even as you fear for the safety of anyone within a 10-mile radius of him and a steering wheel. It's also during his childhood that he befriends Patrick Star, who of course becomes his best friend. Patrick, a starfish, he's Patrick, lovable, dim-witted, and prone to fits of childlike wonder and equally childlike tantrums. Their friendship is one for the ages, built on a shared love of silliness, imagination, and a complete disregard for common sense. They engage in all sorts of childhood games and adventures. We see flashbacks of them building sandcastles, playing tag, and generally just being the most chaotic duo Bikini Bottom has ever seen. Their games often involve elaborate schemes, improbable outcomes, and usually end with someone, or something, getting inadvertently destroyed. It's a testament to their bond that they always bounce back, ready for the next adventure, no matter how many times they accidentally flood the town or unleash an ancient evil. Their shared history is so deep that it's hard to imagine one without the other. They're two halves of a very strange, very endearing whole. SpongeBob also develops a love for jellyfishing during this period. Jellyfishing, for the uninitiated, is essentially butterfly netting, but with jellyfish. It's a popular pastime in Bikini Bottom, a sport, a hobby, a way of life for some. SpongeBob naturally excels at it. He's a natural, a jellyfishing prodigy. He has a specific technique, a specific net, all reliable, and a specific, almost spiritual connection to the jellyfish. He doesn't just catch them, he understands them. He talks to them. He even has a favourite, a blue jellyfish named Jelly. It's his passion, his escape, and a source of endless joy. It's also, occasionally, a source of conflict, as some jellyfish are less than thrilled about being caught, even if it's just for a moment. But SpongeBob always means well, and his love for the sport is infectious. It's one of the earliest indications of his boundless enthusiasm for life, and his ability to find wonder in the simplest things. And then there's the bubbles. SpongeBob shows an early aptitude for blowing bubbles. Not just any bubbles, mind you, but elaborate, intricate, sometimes even sentient bubbles. He can blow bubbles in the shape of animals, bubbles that carry messages, bubbles that trap people. It's an art form for him, a skill he owns from a young age. This isn't just a casual hobby, it's a genuine talent, bordering on a superpower. He can create entire bubble worlds, use bubbles as transportation, even weaponize them if the situation calls for it. It's another one of those quirky, seemingly insignificant details that, when you look at it closely, reveals a whole lot about SpongeBob's unique abilities and his boundless creativity. It's not just blowing bubbles, it's bubble bending. Finally, it's during his childhood that he learns about the Krusty Krab restaurant and its famous Krabby Patty. This is a pivotal moment because the Krusty Krab isn't just a restaurant, it's SpongeBob's destiny. He hears tales of the legendary Krabby Patty, a sandwich so delicious, so perfectly crafted that it inspires awe and devotion. The Krusty Krab, run by the notoriously cheap but surprisingly endearing Eugene H. Krabs, becomes a beacon for young SpongeBob. It's the place where he dreams of working, the place where he imagines himself flipping patties and serving up smiles. This isn't just a casual interest, it's an obsession. He idolizes the Krusty Krab, the Krabby Patty, and even, to a certain extent, Mr. Krabs himself. He probably practices making Krabby Patties in his imagination, perfecting his technique long before he ever steps foot in the kitchen. The lure of the Krusty Krab is strong, and it sets him on a path that will define his adult life. It's the ultimate goal, the pinnacle of culinary achievement in his young mind. And with that, the stage is set for the next chapter of his life, where he'll finally get to pursue his dream, and inevitably cause even more delightful chaos. We're building up quite a tally of existential questions and absurd observations here, aren't we? The universe is sentient, fish breathe water, sponges are born in pineapples, and a starfish is a genius compared to a sponge driver. Just wait until we get to the actual Krusty Krab. That's a whole other level of weird. Anyway, so SpongeBob's earliest memories are pretty much entirely consumed by the Krusty Krab, which, if you're somehow unfamiliar, is this fast food joint run by a crab, Eugene H. Krabs, who we'll get to, don't worry. It's basically the pinnacle of culinary achievement in SpongeBob's young mind, and he's absolutely obsessed with becoming a fry cook there. Like, not just a fry cook fashion, the fry cook. He doesn't have other career aspirations. This isn't a phase. This is his entire personality forming around the idea of flipping patties for Mr. Krabs. He idolizes Mr. Krabs, which, looking back, is genuinely hilarious considering Mr. Krabs' entire deal is being, well, let's just say, fiscally conservative to an almost villainous degree. But young SpongeBob sees him as this benevolent, genius restaurateur, a titan of industry, a culinary god. He's completely blind to any of Mr. Krabs' less savoury traits, probably because at this age, SpongeBob himself is just pure, unadulterated optimism. He sees the best in everything, and Mr. Krabs, to him, represents the ultimate dream. It's a level of hero worship that, frankly, is a little concerning in retrospect, but it fuels SpongeBob's entire childhood ambition, so naturally he starts practicing a lot. His home, which is a pineapple by the way, becomes his personal Krusty Krab training ground. He's not just playing pretend either, he's genuinely trying to replicate the Krabby Patty, the signature sandwich of the Krusty Krab, which is, again, the only thing he cares about. He's probably using whatever ingredients he can get his little sponge hands on. Maybe some kelp, some sand dollars, who knows. The canon is delightfully vague on the specifics of his early culinary experiments, But we know he's dedicated. He's probably making these lopsided, probably inedible, but heartfelt Krabby Patty facsimiles. And he's doing it with this intense, almost frightening focus. It's not just a game, it's preparation for his destiny. He's honing his spatula skills, perfecting his patty flipping technique, probably even practicing his order-taking voice. It's also during this period that his distinctive laugh develops. You know the one. The high-pitched, almost hyena-like cackle that can, depending on your mood, either be endearing or drive you absolutely up the wall. It's a laugh that perfectly encapsulates his unbridled enthusiasm and his often naive joy. It's not just a sound, it's a character trait, a signature. And it's born out of this period of pure, unadulterated childhood glee, probably while he's imagining himself finally working at the Krusty Krab, or maybe after successfully flipping a particularly tricky imaginary patty. It's a laugh that says, I am happy and I want everyone to know it, whether they like it or not. This early enthusiasm for his job prospects is, honestly, unparalleled. Most kids dream of being astronauts or superheroes, which, fine, but SpongeBob's dream is so specific, so grounded in the mundane, yet he treats it with the same reverence. He doesn't just want to be a fry cook, he needs to be a fry cook. It's his calling, his purpose. He's not just looking forward to a job, he's looking forward to a life defined by the Krusty Krab. This isn't just a childhood fantasy, it's the blueprint for his entire existence. And it's this unwavering, almost irrational dedication that really sets him apart. He's not just a kid with a dream, he's a kid with a single-minded, laser-focused obsession that will define his entire adult life. This period also solidifies his strong sense of loyalty and dedication, not just to the Krusty Krab, but to the idea of doing a job well, of being a good employee even before he is an employee. He's probably already imagining himself as the most dedicated, most loyal fry cook in all of Bikini Bottom. He's probably already mentally designing his uniform, practicing his welcome to the Krusty Krab spiel. This isn't just about cooking. It's about belonging, about contributing, about being an integral part of something he loves. And that loyalty, that dedication, will become a defining characteristic, often to his own detriment, but always with the purest of intentions. He's the kind of kid who, if he made a promise, he'd stick to it, no matter how ridiculous. And he makes a lot of promises, mostly to himself, about the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob's childhood is, in essence, a masterclass in innocence and a perpetually positive outlook. He doesn't seem to have any real worries or anxieties, which is, again, a little baffling considering the general chaos of Bikini Bottom. But he navigates it all with this wide-eyed wonder and an unshakable belief that everything is going to be okay, and probably end with the Krabby Patty. He's just happy to be alive, happy to be a sponge, happy to be in Bikini Bottom, and supremely happy at the prospect of one day serving up delicious, delicious Krabby Patties. This isn't just a phase of childhood, it's the bedrock of his entire personality. He's not just optimistic, he's practically a walking, talking, absorbent embodiment of optimism. Even when things go wrong, and they often do, he bounces back with an almost immediate, sometimes infuriating, cheerfulness. He also learns basic life lessons and social interactions within Bikini Bottom during this time, though I use learns loosely, because sometimes it feels like he just kind of experiences them without fully internalizing the lessons. He's probably interacting with other young sea creatures, maybe getting into some harmless mischief, but always with that underlying innocence. He's learning how to make friends, how to navigate the social currents of his underwater world, and probably how to annoy his neighbours, though I'm sure that's entirely unintentional on his part. He's not learning cynicism or skepticism. He's learning how to be a good, if sometimes overbearing, friend. He's learning the value of community, even if that community is occasionally exasperated by him. Ultimately, SpongeBob's childhood sets the foundation for his adult personality and aspirations in a way that is almost unnervingly consistent. There's no real rebellion, no dramatic shift in his worldview. The kid who dreamed of being a fry cook is the adult who is a fry cook, and he's just as enthusiastic, just as dedicated, and just as relentlessly optimistic as he ever was. His childhood isn't a period he grows out of. It's a state of being he carries with him, largely unchanged into adulthood. It's a testament to the power of early influences, or perhaps just to the sheer stubbornness of a sponge with a dream. He doesn't evolve much, but that's kind of the point. He finds his bliss early, and he sticks with it. Come hell or high water, or more accurately, come Plankton or the Flying Dutchman. So by the time we catch up with him as an adult, he's basically the same sponge, just with a driver's license, or lack thereof, we'll get to that, and an actual job at the Krusty Krab. It's a remarkably stable character arc, or lack thereof, depending on how you look at it. He's a creature of habit, and those habits were formed early and cemented deeply. The sheer consistency of his character from childhood to adulthood is genuinely impressive, almost to the point of being a little unsettling. It's like he was born knowing exactly what he wanted to do, and he never once wavered. Which honestly is kind of admirable, if also a little bit, SpongeBob. This unwavering dedication to his dream, this almost pathological positivity, and this singular focus on the Krusty Krab and Krabby Patties, these are the pillars of his entire being. And they're all firmly established during these formative years. He's not just a character, he's a meticulously crafted, if slightly unhinged, testament to the power of childhood dreams, no matter how humble or absorbent they may be. And this is where the real story, the story of SpongeBob, as we know him, truly begins. I mean, how does a sponge even have a childhood, right? Like, does he have sponge parents? Do they just, bud off? And what about the Krabby Patty formula? How did Mr. Krabs even come up with it? Was there a rival Krusty Krab? And where did Patrick come from? Was he just, always there? Next time, we'll dive into the terrifying world of Courage the Cowardly Dog, or maybe the bizarre cosmology of Adventure Time, or perhaps we'll finally tackle the existential dread of the amazing world of Gumball. So, we've established that the universe is basically a giant, cosmic Rube Goldberg machine, designed exclusively to produce one small yellow sponge. And at some point, after the whole prehistoric debacle, the jellyfish fields were established, and some vague form of civilization began to bubble up. Now we finally arrive at what most people consider the actual beginning, the early 21st century, as the timeline so helpfully puts it, which I assume means sometime after the invention of the internet but before the complete collapse of society. This is when our boy, SpongeBob SquarePants, decides it's time to make a life for himself. He moves into what I can only describe as a giant, hollowed-out pineapple, which, if you think about it, is just a tropical fruit that decided to become a house. It's located at 124 Conch Street, a detail that is utterly meaningless until it becomes the subject of a postal dispute, because of course it does. His alarm clock, because even sponges need to wake up, is a foghorn. Yes, a foghorn. Not a gentle chime, not a bird song, but a device designed to cut through the densest oceanic mist with a sound that could wake the dead. I'm genuinely curious about the thought process behind that choice. Did he just find it lying around? Was it a gift? Is this a common alarm clock choice in Bikini Bottom? These are the questions that keep me up at night, people. Anyway, this ear-splitting contraption jolts him awake for what he considers a momentous occasion, his first day of job hunting. You'd think, given his boundless enthusiasm, he'd just burst out the door. But no. The sheer weight of adult responsibility, or perhaps just the lingering reverberations of the foghorn, makes him incredibly nervous. He stands there, practically vibrating with anxiety, staring at the hallowed doors of the Krusty Krab. Now, the Krusty Krab, as we'll come to know it, is a fast food establishment run by Eugene H. Krabs, a crab who, despite being a multimillionaire by some estimates, operates his business with the financial philosophy of a miserly squirrel hoarding nuts for the apocalypse. It's a culinary institution, in the loosest sense of the word, known primarily for its Krabby Patty, a sandwich so delicious it has driven entire populations to madness and sparked international incidents. But we'll get to the secret formula later, trust me. For now, it's just a building, a beacon of employment for a hopeful sponge. SpongeBob, paralysed by pre-job jitters, is saved from his own indecision by his best friend, Patrick Star. Patrick, a starfish whose intellectual capacity can best be described as charming abyss, is often the catalyst for SpongeBob's adventures, either by accident or by sheer, unadulterated encouragement. In this instance, it's the latter. Patrick, with the wisdom of a slightly damp rock, basically shoves SpongeBob through the doors, because what are friends for, if not to propel you into terrifying new experiences? Inside, things don't exactly go as planned. Mr. Krabs, ever the pragmatist, takes one look at SpongeBob, a small yellow porous creature, and immediately dismisses him. He's not exactly looking for a fry cook who might accidentally absorb all the grease. Squidward Tentacles, the cashier and resident curmudgeon, is even less impressed. Squidward, a squid who dreams of a life of artistic grandeur and quiet solitude, views SpongeBob with a mixture of disdain and utter exasperation, a dynamic that will, for better or worse, define their working relationship for decades to come. To them, SpongeBob is just a nuisance, unqualified, and utterly unsuited for the high-stakes world of flipping Krabby Patties. Mr. Krabs, wanting to get rid of SpongeBob without actually having to tell him no, because confrontation is expensive apparently, devises a classic wild goose chase. He sends SpongeBob on a quest for a hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments. Now let's break that down. Hydrodynamic implies it's designed for efficient movement in water, which, okay, makes sense for an underwater spatula. But port and starboard attachments, those are nautical terms for left and right. So he's asking for a spatula with left and right attachments. What kind of attachments? For what purpose? Is it for flipping two patties at once? Is it for steering the spatula like a tiny ship? The writers, in their infinite wisdom, never actually explain this, and I genuinely have no idea what those attachments are supposed to be. It's a completely absurd request, designed to be impossible, a clear signal to go away and never come back. But SpongeBob, bless his naive little heart, takes it completely seriously. He believes in the power of the spatula, the mystical tool that will unlock his culinary destiny. He embarks on his quest, presumably with a heart full of hope and a head full of questions about what exactly port and starboard attachments look like. He ends up at Bargain Mart, which, as the name suggests, is a discount store. And, in a twist that confounds all logic and reason, SpongeBob finds the specialised spatula. It's just sitting there on a shelf, waiting for him. This is either a testament to the sheer unbridled chaos of the Bikini Bottom retail market, or it implies that Mr. Krabs' impossible request was actually just a very niche item that he himself was too cheap to buy. I'm leaning towards the latter, because Mr. Krabs, while SpongeBob is off on his spatula pilgrimage, the Krusty Krab is suddenly inundated. A busload of anchovies, a species generally known for their schooling behaviour, and apparently their insatiable hunger for Krabby Patties, descends upon the restaurant. The place is immediately overwhelmed. Anchovies are swarming, demanding food, creating a chaotic scene of aquatic pandemonium. Squidward is, predictably, stressed beyond belief, probably wondering if his clarinet lessons were truly a waste of time. Mr. Krabs, meanwhile, sees his profits soaring, but also his restaurant teetering on the brink of a full-blown anchovy riot. is a classic fast food nightmare, but with more fins. Just as the situation reaches critical mass, a hero emerges. SpongeBob, hydrodynamic spatula, with port and starboard attachments firmly in hand, returns. He takes one look at the sheer volume of hungry anchovies, the overwhelmed kitchen, and the impending doom, and he doesn't flinch, he doesn't panic, he just starts cooking, and he cooks with a speed and efficiency that borders on the supernatural. He's a blur of yellow, flipping patties, assembling sandwiches, and serving them out with a joyful intensity that is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The anchovies are fed, one after another, their hunger sated by the sheer force of SpongeBob's spatula-wielding prowess. It's a culinary ballet, a symphony of sizzle and slap, and it saves the Krusty Krab from utter collapse. Mr. Krabs, who had initially written SpongeBob off as a complete waste of time, is utterly astonished. He watches, jaw agape, as SpongeBob single-handedly manages a crisis that would have crippled any other fry cook. The sheer volume of Krabby Patties produced, the speed, the precision, the almost magical way SpongeBob handles the grill. It's undeniable. This little sponge is a culinary prodigy. And more importantly, he's a prodigy who works for practically nothing, which is Mr. Krabs' favourite kind of prodigy. So without further ado, Mr. Krabs hires him on the spot. SpongeBob SquarePants, the nervous, spatula-seeking sponge, is officially the new fry cook at the Krusty Krab. This, of course, is terrible news for Squidward. His dreams of a peaceful, quiet existence, punctuated only by the mournful wail of his clarinet, are shattered. He now has to work alongside SpongeBob, a creature whose very existence seems to be a walking, talking antithesis to everything Squidward holds dear. SpongeBob's cheerful, boisterous, relentlessly optimistic nature grates on Squidward's nerves, like sandpaper on a chalkboard. Their dynamic, established in these very first moments, will be a cornerstone of the show. A perpetual clash between unbridled joy and cynical misery. And that, my friends, is how SpongeBob got his job, and how Squidward's suffering truly began. And then, at some point in the early 21st century, after settling into his new pineapple abode, SpongeBob finally got to meet his immediate neighbours. This was, as you can imagine, a pivotal moment, shaping pretty much everything that follows. First up was Patrick Star, a starfish who, conveniently enough, lived under a rock right next door. Their initial interactions, while not explicitly detailed in a single, definitive origin story, immediately established a bond of pure, unadulterated, and frankly, somewhat baffling friendship. Patrick, from the jump, is presented as SpongeBob's intellectual equal, which is to say, not very. He's simple-minded, incredibly loyal, and possesses a remarkable ability to find joy in absolutely nothing. Their shared brain cell, if you will, is a powerful force, often leading to shenanigans that defy all logic and, more importantly, all peace and quiet. Then there's Squidward Tentacles, who lives in an Easter Island head right between SpongeBob and Patrick. Squidward, a perpetually disgruntled octopus, is the antithesis of everything SpongeBob and Patrick embody. Where they find joy, he finds misery. Where they find fun, he finds extreme annoyance. His introduction to SpongeBob was less a meeting and more an immediate, visceral rejection. SpongeBob, bless his naive little heart, perceives this disdain as some kind of quirky affection, or perhaps just a challenge to be overcome. He genuinely believes that if he just tries hard enough, Squidward will eventually warm up to him. This, of course, never happens. Not really. It's a bit like trying to get a rock to spontaneously combust through sheer willpower. You can try, but the rock is just going to sit there, unimpressed, and probably ask you to keep it down. So, with the neighbourhood dynamic firmly established, SpongeBob and Patrick immediately launch into their routine of loud and disruptive activities. This is, I think, the core engine of the entire show. They'll play jellyfishing, which involves catching jellyfish with nets, a pastime that is somehow both entirely innocent and deeply irritating. They'll blow bubbles, which sounds harmless enough until you realise the sheer scale and sonic impact of SpongeBob's bubble artistry. They'll run around, yell, invent new games involving various forms of mild property damage, and generally exist at a volume level usually reserved for rock concerts or active construction sites. All of this, naturally, happens directly outside Squidward's window. Every single time. It's a cosmic joke, I suppose, that the most boisterous, irritating duo in Bikini Bottom would end up flanking the one resident who craves nothing more than absolute, undisturbed solitude. The writers clearly had a dark sense of humour when designing this particular residential layout. SpongeBob's attempts to befriend Squidward are, frankly, relentless. He interprets every groan, every sigh, every slammed door as an invitation for further interaction. If Squidward expresses a passing interest in something, SpongeBob immediately latches onto it as a shared passion. If Squidward tries to avoid him, SpongeBob sees it as a playful game of chase. It's a fascinating study in willful misinterpretation. He'll bring Squidward gifts, usually handmade and often useless. He'll try to include Squidward in his games, which Squidward always refuses. He'll even try to teach Squidward things, like how to properly blow a bubble or how to catch a jellyfish, despite Squidward's clear and utter lack of interest. It's not just a running gag, it's a foundational pillar of their relationship. SpongeBob's unwavering optimism, his inability to perceive genuine malice or disinterest, is both his greatest strength and, for Squidward, his greatest torment. It's a cycle that never breaks, a Sisyphean task for Squidward, where the boulder is replaced by a giggling sponge and a dim-witted starfish. With his home life in full swing, SpongeBob also establishes his daily routine, which for the most part revolves around two things: waking up with an alarming amount of enthusiasm and going to work at the Krusty Krab. He doesn't just go to work, mind you, he practically teleports there, fueled by an almost pathological love for his job. His alarm clock, a foghorn, is a testament to his commitment to starting the day with a bang, much to the chagrin of anyone within a mile radius. His enthusiasm for his job at the Krusty Krab is from day one nothing short of legendary. He's not just an employee, he's a devotee. He lives and breathes Krabby Patties. He talks about them with a reverence usually reserved for religious texts. He cleans the grill with a fervour that suggests he's polishing a sacred artifact. He greets customers with a level of joy that borders on manic. This isn't just a job for him. It's his calling, his destiny, the very reason he was put on this earth. And it's unwavering. We're talking decades of this level of enthusiasm, without a single dip. He's never late, never calls in sick, never complains. He is quite possibly the single most dedicated employee in the history of fictional retail. It's genuinely baffling, and also, I think, secretly admired by his boss, Mr. Krabs, who, despite his greed, recognises a good thing when he sees it. SpongeBob is essentially a free, self-motivating labour force powered by pure, unadulterated joy. These initial interactions, both at home and at work, serve to firmly establish SpongeBob's core personality. Naive, optimistic to a fault, eternally cheerful, and possessing an almost supernatural ability to find the good in everything, even when the good is actively trying to run away from him. He's a character who genuinely believes in the best of everyone, even Squidward, and this belief, while often misplaced, is what makes him so endearing. He's not cynical, he's not jaded, he's just SpongeBob. He approaches every day as a grand adventure, every task as a thrilling challenge, and every person as a potential friend. It's a worldview that, frankly, would exhaust most normal people, but for SpongeBob, it's just Tuesday. Patrick's simple-minded and loyal nature is also quickly showcased through his friendship with SpongeBob. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, let's be honest. His thought processes are often circuitous, to say the least, but his loyalty to SpongeBob is absolute. He'll follow SpongeBob into any absurd situation, no questions asked. He'll participate in any crazy scheme. He'll even defend SpongeBob, albeit sometimes clumsily, against perceived threats. He's the ultimate ride-or-die best friend. Even if he occasionally forgets what they're riding or why they're dying, his simplicity is often a source of humour, but it's also a source of genuine warmth. He doesn't judge, he doesn't complicate things, he just is there for SpongeBob. It's a beautiful, if somewhat dim-witted, bond. And then there's Squidward. His cynical and self-centered personality is established almost immediately through his interactions with his two, shall we say, energetic neighbours. Squidward views himself as an artist, a connoisseur of fine culture, a sophisticated individual trapped in a world of buffoons. He plays the clarinet, often badly, and believes himself to be a musical prodigy. He dreams of a life free from SpongeBob's laughter and Patrick's grunts. He's constantly trying to escape their orbit, to find a moment of peace, a sliver of quiet. His self-centeredness isn't malicious necessarily. It's more a deep-seated belief that he is simply better than everyone else around him. He wants to be admired, to be celebrated, but he's also too lazy and too easily annoyed to actually put in the work required to achieve those things. He's a classic curmudgeon, and his misery is ironically a constant source of entertainment for the audience, even if it's a source of constant pain for him. So, the dynamic is set. SpongeBob's unwavering optimism, a force of nature, colliding head-on with Squidward's perpetual misery. It's a clash of titans, a comedic Ouroboros where SpongeBob's attempts to cheer Squidward up only make Squidward more miserable, which in turn makes SpongeBob try even harder. It's a perfect comedic engine, one that has fueled countless episodes and gags. You have the innocent, well-meaning but ultimately irritating hero, the dim-witted but loyal sidekick, and the perpetually put-upon, cynical foil. This triumvirate, established right from the moment SpongeBob moved in, is the bedrock of the entire series. It's a delicate balance of personalities that, against all odds, just works. It's a testament to the writer's genius that they could create such a simple yet endlessly entertaining conflict. And this conflict, this beautiful, terrible, exhausting conflict, is what we'll be seeing play out for the foreseeable future. Now, you might be wondering, with all this immediate chaos, how does Mr. Krabs fit into this? And what about the other residents of Bikini Bottom? We'll get to that, trust me, because while SpongeBob's immediate circle is vital, the wider world of Bikini Bottom is just as rich and, frankly, just as absurd. The sheer number of bizarre characters, and even more bizarre rules that govern their lives, is a rabbit hole we're only just beginning to descend. And speaking of descending, the sheer number of times Squidward has tried to move away from SpongeBob and Patrick, only to be foiled by some cosmic force, is a tally we should probably start keeping. It's going to be a high one. Next up, we'll delve into the intricacies of the Krusty Krab, the economics of Bikini Bottom, and the introduction of some truly iconic, if not entirely sane, supporting characters. Get ready, because the weirdness is only just beginning to ramp up. The foundations are laid, the players are in position, and the stage is set for absolute, unadulterated chaos. So with all that in mind, I'm left with a few lingering questions. How did Squidward tolerate this for so long? What exactly is the appeal of jellyfishing? And how does SpongeBob manage to maintain that level of unbridled enthusiasm without, just collapsing from sheer exhaustion? For the next video, we could dive into the timeline of Adventure Time, or perhaps the surprisingly dense lore of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, or maybe even the convoluted history of the Kirby universe. Let me know what you think. So we've covered the primordial soup, the ancient empires, the bizarre prehistory, and the even more bizarre recent history, where a bunch of pirates just decided to become the ocean, which, makes perfect sense. Anyway, at some point, probably sometime in the early 21st century, judging by the general technological level and cultural references, we finally arrive at what most people would recognise as, well, the main event. This is where SpongeBob SquarePants, the titular character, makes his grand entrance into the cosmic ballet of Bikini Bottom. And when I say grand entrance, I mean he just kind of is there, living in a giant, fully furnished pineapple. I genuinely have no idea how a pineapple ended up at the bottom of the ocean, let alone one that's been hollowed out, plumbed and decorated with a full complement of nautical-themed furniture. Was it a shipwreck? Did it grow there? Did some ancient, forgotten civilization cultivate giant, submersible fruit? The lore is frustratingly silent on this crucial matter. All we know is, it's his house, it's iconic, and it's where he lives his best, most absorbent life. His daily routine, for the most part, revolves around his job. He's a fry cook, and not just any fry cook, but the fry cook, the undisputed master of the spatula at the Krusty Krab. This establishment is a fast food restaurant shaped like a lobster trap, which again raises some questions about the local marine ecosystem's self-awareness, but we'll gloss over that for now. The Krusty Krab is owned and operated by Eugene H. Krabs, more commonly known as Mr. Krabs. Now, Mr. Krabs is, to put it mildly, a character. He's a red crab, perpetually clad in a blue shirt, and his defining characteristic, the very core of his being, is an insatiable, almost pathological greed. He loves money more than anything, probably more than his own daughter Pearl, a whale who, again, what is happening here? The Krusty Krab's main draw, its golden goose, its entire reason for existing, is the Krabby Patty. This is a hamburger, but, underwater. The exact ingredients are a closely guarded secret, a secret so potent that it drives the primary antagonist of the entire series. Speaking of antagonists, let's talk about Sheldon J. Plankton. Plankton is a copepod, which is a tiny microscopic crustacean. He's also the proprietor of the Chum Bucket, the Krusty Krab's direct and utterly failing competitor. The Chum Bucket, as its name suggests, serves chum, which is essentially fish offal. It's universally reviled, and for good reason. Plankton's entire existence, his singular driving force, is to steal the Krabby Patty formula. He believes, with an almost religious fervour, that if he could just get his tiny hands on that recipe, he could finally achieve world domination. And honestly, given how obsessed everyone in Bikini Bottom is with Krabby Patties, he might actually be right. His schemes are elaborate, often involving giant robots, mind control devices, or incredibly convoluted disguises, and they almost always end in spectacular failure, usually due to SpongeBob's unwitting interference or Plankton's own hubris. He's got a computer wife named Karen, who is significantly smarter and more cynical than he is, and she's often the voice of reason, or at least the voice of snark, in their villainous endeavours. The sheer number of times Plankton has attempted to steal that formula is, frankly, astounding. It's like a running tally of futility, a testament to both his persistence and his utter lack of success. I think we're up to, 2,247 attempts now, give or take a few dozen. Now back to SpongeBob's social circle, because even a fry cook needs friends. His absolute best friend, his ride or die, his partner in crime, usually accidental crime, is Patrick Star. Patrick is a pink starfish who lives under a rock, which is, I suppose, marginally more believable than a pineapple house, but still. He's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, often characterised by his extreme naivete, his love of napping, and his insatiable appetite for, you guessed it, Krabby Patties. Their friendship is a cornerstone of the series, a pure, unadulterated bond of silliness and mutual affection. They spend their days jellyfishing, blowing bubbles, and generally causing a low-level, chaotic ruckus throughout Bikini Bottom. Their adventures are often the catalyst for the show's plots, whether they're trying to catch a legendary jellyfish or accidentally destroying half the town with a giant bubble. Then there's Squidward Tentacles. Squidward is an octopus, though he only has 6 tentacles, which is a detail that has genuinely bothered me for years. Is he a mutant? Was he born with a congenital defect? Did he lose 2 in some unrecorded, tragic backstory? The writers, in their infinite wisdom, have left us to ponder this existential crisis. He lives in a house shaped like a moai, one of those giant stone heads from Easter Island, right between SpongeBob and Patrick. And this proximity is, for Squidward, a source of unending torment. He is by nature a curmudgeonly, artistic, and deeply cynical individual who craves nothing more than peace, quiet, and the opportunity to play his clarinet, a skill he believes he possesses in spades despite all evidence to the contrary. He also works at the Krusty Krab as the cashier, and his interactions with SpongeBob and Patrick are a constant source of exasperation for him. He's perpetually trying to escape their antics, to find some semblance of tranquility, and he almost always fails spectacularly. His misery, unfortunately for him, is often played for comedic effect, and he's become a beloved character despite, or perhaps because of, his perpetually sour disposition. And then we have Sandy Cheeks. Sandy is a squirrel from Texas, living in an oxygen-filled tree dome at the bottom of the ocean. This, my friends, is where the show just throws its hands up and says, you know what? Logic is for land dwellers. How did she get there? How does she maintain a perfectly balanced ecosystem within her dome? How does she breathe underwater when she's outside the dome, which she frequently does, often with just a diving helmet? These are questions that will haunt me until the end of time. Sandy is an inventor, a scientist, and a karate expert, a true Renaissance squirrel. She's incredibly intelligent, strong, and adventurous, often dragging SpongeBob and Patrick into her various scientific experiments or extreme sports endeavours. Her inventions range from the incredibly useful to the utterly bizarre, and she's a vital member of the main cast, providing a much-needed dose of scientific inquiry and sheer physical prowess to the otherwise chaotic world of Bikini Bottom. She's also, surprisingly, one of the few characters who seems to have a firm grasp on how the real world works, which makes her interactions with the other, more eccentric characters even funnier. So, with this core group established, the stage is set for countless adventures. SpongeBob, Patrick, and their friends embark on these escapades across Bikini Bottom and beyond. They explore forgotten caves, encounter strange sea creatures, accidentally summon ancient evils, and generally just bumble their way through life with an unwavering sense of optimism. These aren't just one-off events, they're woven into the fabric of their daily lives. One recurring element, a source of endless frustration for SpongeBob, and endless amusement for everyone else, is his perpetual attendance at Mrs. Puff's boating school. Mrs. Puff is a pufferfish, and she's SpongeBob's driving instructor. Despite his best efforts, and Mrs. Puff's increasingly desperate attempts to pass him, SpongeBob perpetually fails his boating test. He's a menace behind the wheel, a one-sponge wrecking crew, and the sight of him attempting to navigate a simple course usually results in catastrophic property damage, and Mrs. Puff inflating to her maximum exasperated size. It's a running gag that highlights SpongeBob's singular inability to grasp even the most basic concepts of driving, despite his otherwise impressive skills as a fry cook. The sheer number of times he's failed this test is another one of those escalating tallies, a testament to his unique brand of incompetence when it comes to operating a vehicle. I'm pretty sure he's failed more times than Plankton has tried to steal the formula, which is saying something. These characters experience various life events, holidays and challenges, often with chaotic results. We see them celebrate Christmas, Halloween, and even their own unique Bikini Bottom holidays. They deal with everyday problems, like losing a pet snail, Gary, SpongeBob's meowing snail, who's surprisingly intelligent and often the voice of reason. Dealing with annoying neighbours, see Squidward always, or trying to impress a celebrity. The beauty of it is that even the most mundane situations quickly spiral into utter absurdity. A simple trip to the grocery store can become an epic quest. A day at the beach can turn into a battle against a giant sandworm, and a friendly game of tag can lead to the accidental discovery of a lost city. The world of Bikini Bottom, while seemingly small, is vast and full of unexpected wonders and dangers. And through it all, SpongeBob maintains his relentlessly positive attitude, his unwavering loyalty to his friends, and his absolute dedication to his job. He's a simple sponge with simple desires, and that's precisely what makes him so endearing, even when he's driving everyone, especially Squidward, absolutely bonkers. The sheer amount of chaos these characters generate on a daily basis is, frankly, impressive. It's a testament to the fact that even in a seemingly idyllic underwater town, life is never, ever boring, and this is just the beginning of their adventures. We'll get to some of the truly wild stuff, trust me. And speaking of things that defy all logic and reason, we then have the absolute bedrock of SpongeBob's entire existence, his twin obsessions, his job at the Krusty Krab, and his undying, almost religious devotion to the retired superheroes, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Now these two, they're basically the elder statesmen of Bikini Bottom's crime-fighting scene, if crime-fighting means mostly bickering and forgetting where they parked the invisible boatmobile. They live in the Shady Shoals rest home, which frankly seems like a deeply irresponsible place to house two individuals who still occasionally try to fight evil, usually resulting in more chaos than actual justice. SpongeBob and Patrick, though, they're absolutely enthralled. They run the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy fan club, they own every piece of merchandise, and they regularly try to get the duo to come out of retirement for various, usually minor, perceived threats. It's a classic case of hero worship, except the heroes are well past their prime, and the worshippers are, well, SpongeBob and Patrick. The sheer number of times they accidentally endanger the very people they admire, or force them into increasingly bizarre situations, is genuinely staggering. They've been shrunk, they've been turned into babies, they've been subjected to the horrors of modern technology like television remotes. And through it all, Mermaid Man mostly just grumbles, evil, and Barnacle Boy just sighs. It's a dynamic that really highlights SpongeBob's almost childlike innocence, this inability to see the flaws in his idols, which honestly is probably for the best. If he ever truly grasped the reality of their faded glory, I think a part of Bikini Bottom's very foundation would just crumble. Now, back at the pineapple, we have Gary, SpongeBob's pet snail. And let me tell you, Gary is not your average gastropod. He communicates exclusively through meows, which SpongeBob somehow understands perfectly. I don't know if it's a shared psychic link, or if SpongeBob just really wants to understand, but it works. And Gary, despite being a snail, possesses an almost unsettling level of intelligence. He reads books, he writes poetry, he pays bills, he even occasionally offers sage advice, all conveyed through various inflections of meow. He's often the voice of reason, or at least the voice of quiet judgment in SpongeBob's chaotic life. There are episodes where Gary is clearly the smartest being in the room, outwitting everyone, including SpongeBob himself. He's also fiercely loyal, though he has his limits, especially when it comes to being forgotten or neglected. The snail race episode, for instance, where he's initially reluctant but then absolutely crushes the competition, perfectly illustrates that beneath the simple meow lies a highly capable, if somewhat understated, individual. He's the silent observer, the intellectual anchor in a world of delightful absurdity. And frankly, I think he deserves more credit for keeping SpongeBob from, well, accidentally destroying the fabric of reality on a more regular basis. The sheer amount of emotional labour Gary performs, just meowing his way through SpongeBob's existential crises, is truly commendable. Speaking of intellectual anchors, or rather, the lack thereof, let's pivot to Plankton's computer wife, Karen. Yes, his wife. She's a supercomputer built by Plankton himself, and she's usually the brains behind the operation, or at least the one who actually remembers the plan. Karen often assists Plankton in his never-ending, increasingly elaborate, and almost universally doomed schemes to steal the Krabby Patty formula. She offers strategic advice, constructs gadgets, and provides a generally sarcastic, dry-witted commentary on Plankton's failures. Their relationship is, to put it mildly, tumultuous. They bicker constantly, sometimes even physically fighting, well, as much as a computer screen can fight a tiny Plankton. But there's an undeniable affection there. Karen, despite her often cynical outlook, genuinely seems to care for Plankton, even if she's exasperated by his incompetence. She's the enabler, the co-conspirator, and sometimes the only reason Plankton gets anything done at all. Without Karen, Plankton would probably just be a tiny angry organism, muttering to himself in a bucket. With her, he's a tiny angry organism with a fully functional, if perpetually failing, evil laboratory. Her role is crucial in escalating the stakes of Plankton's schemes, providing the technological muscle that his minuscule physical form simply can't. It's a testament to her programming that she hasn't just short-circuited from sheer frustration. Now let's talk about the unsung hero of perpetual suffering, Squidward Tentacles. Squidward, bless his cynical little heart, just wants peace and quiet. He wants to play his clarinet, paint his self-portraits, and generally be left alone. Unfortunately for him, he lives between SpongeBob and Patrick, two beings whose entire existence seems to be a direct affront to his desire for tranquility. SpongeBob and Patrick frequently annoy Squidward with their antics and loud activities, whether it's bubble blowing, jellyfishing, or just their general boisterousness. Their obliviousness to his suffering is almost masterful. They genuinely believe they're his best friends, and that he secretly enjoys their company, despite all evidence to the contrary. Squidward's attempts to escape them, whether through moving, building walls, or just outright hostility, are always met with failure, usually because SpongeBob and Patrick, in their innocent enthusiasm, inadvertently drag him back into their orbit. It's a comedic cycle of torment, where Squidward's misery is directly proportional to SpongeBob and Patrick's joy. He's the straight man, the perpetually put-upon neighbour, and his exasperated sighs are practically a soundtrack to Bikini Bottom. The sheer amount of property damage, emotional distress, and outright physical harm he endures is, frankly, astounding. And yet, he never truly leaves, which, when you think about it, is perhaps the most tragic part of all. He's perpetually trapped in this bizarre aquatic purgatory, forever destined to be the third wheel in the most chaotic friendship in the sea. And then, just to add another layer of existential dread and ghostly shenanigans to this already bizarre ecosystem, we have the Flying Dutchman. He's a ghostly pirate, a spectral terror of the deep, who occasionally haunts Bikini Bottom and interacts with the characters, usually to their detriment. He's green, he glows, he can fly, and he loves to scare people. His ship, the Flying Dutchman, is equally spectral, capable of appearing and disappearing at will. He's not overtly evil, more of a mischievous, powerful entity who enjoys a good fright and occasionally a good meal, though how a ghost eats I genuinely have no idea. He's been known to steal souls, banish people to the Flying Dutchman's locker, and generally cause a ruckus. SpongeBob, in his usual naivete, often tries to befriend him, or at least understand him, which usually leads to even more bizarre situations. The Dutchman, for his part, seems to find SpongeBob's unwavering optimism both baffling and occasionally endearing, in a deeply unsettling way. He's a force of nature, a supernatural element that reminds everyone that even in a world of talking sponges and squirrel scientists, there are still things that go bump in the night, or in this case, float menacingly through the water. He's a fantastic recurring character because he introduces a genuine element of the unknown and the slightly terrifying, even if it's always played for laughs. Moving on to another family dynamic that's utterly baffling, we have Pearl, Mr. Krabs' whale daughter. Yes, a whale, and her father is a crab. The canonical explanation for this is, well, it's never explicitly stated, but it's implied she was adopted. Which fine, but the sheer size disparity, the biological impossibility, is just another one of those things you have to accept in Bikini Bottom. Pearl is a typical teenager, despite being a whale. She enjoys shopping, popular culture, hanging out with her friends, and most importantly, spending her dad's money. Mr. Krabs, being the cheapest creature in the ocean, is constantly at odds with Pearl's expensive tastes. Their relationship is a classic father-daughter dynamic, but exaggerated to absurd levels by their species difference and Mr. Krabs' legendary stinginess. Pearl often feels embarrassed by her dad's antics and his obsession with money, while Mr. Krabs is constantly trying to find ways to save a buck, even at Pearl's expense. She's a good kid, though, at heart, and genuinely loves her father, even if he drives her absolutely insane. Her presence adds a layer of relatable teenage angst to the show, even if the teenager in question is a giant cetacean with a penchant for them all. It's a constant source of both humour and, occasionally, genuinely sweet moments, showing that even a penny-pinching crab can have a soft spot for his enormous high-maintenance daughter. Now let's talk about the core engine of the entire show, the very essence of its being, SpongeBob's unwavering optimism and naivete. This isn't just a character trait, it's a cosmic force. It's what drives him into, and often out of, the most unusual situations. He sees the best in everyone, even Plankton, which is honestly impressive. He approaches every day with an almost pathological cheerfulness, a relentless enthusiasm that can be both infectious and utterly maddening, depending on who you are looking at you, Squidward. His naivete means he often misunderstands social cues, takes things literally, and blindly trusts people, even when he absolutely shouldn't. This leads to him being easily manipulated, accidentally causing chaos, or simply stumbling into adventures that no sane person would ever seek out. He's the embodiment of pure, unadulterated joy, and it's this quality that makes him so resilient. No matter how many times he fails, how many times he's hurt, or how many times he accidentally destroys something, he bounces back with the same wide-eyed wonder. It's his superpower, and it's also the source of endless comedic potential. Without that boundless optimism, Bikini Bottom would be a much, much duller place, probably just a quiet, slightly melancholic underwater town. His ability to find joy in the mundane and wonder in the utterly ridiculous is truly something to behold. And what is the object of this boundless optimism, the source of so much conflict and success in Bikini Bottom? The Krabby Patty. It is not just a burger, it is the burger, a highly coveted secret recipe, making the Krusty Krab incredibly successful, and the bane of Plankton's existence. The Krabby Patty is the economic engine of Bikini Bottom, the culinary masterpiece that everyone craves. Its ingredients are a closely guarded secret, known only to Mr. Krabs and, presumably, SpongeBob, who makes them. The sheer deliciousness of this burger is almost legendary. People will line up for miles, endure terrible service, and even risk life and limb for a taste. It's the ultimate comfort food, the perfect meal, and its formula is the most valuable intellectual property in the entire ocean. The lengths Plankton goes to steal it, the elaborate contraptions, the disguises, the mind control schemes, all for this one burger. It's a testament to its mythical status. The Krabby Patty isn't just food, it's a cultural phenomenon within the show, a symbol of everything that makes the Krusty Krab, and by extension, Bikini Bottom, unique. The fact that such a simple, albeit perfectly crafted item can drive so much plot and character motivation is truly remarkable. It's the MacGuffin that everyone wants, and it's the constant, delicious reminder of what's at stake. Despite all these individual quirks, the petty squabbles, the rivalries, and the outright animosity, there's a strange underlying unity in Bikini Bottom. Despite their differences, the residents of Bikini Bottom often come together in times of crisis. Whether it's a giant worm attacking the town, a rogue monster, or a genuinely existential threat, the disparate personalities of SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, Sandy, and even Plankton, sometimes begrudgingly, will put aside their personal issues for the greater good. They might bicker, they might complain, but when the chips are down, they form a surprisingly effective, if chaotic, team. It's a recurring theme that beneath all the absurdity and slapstick, there's a genuine sense of community. They are, in their own bizarre way, a family. They might drive each other absolutely bonkers, but they're all stuck in this pineapple under the sea life together. And when it truly matters, they'll stand up for each other, or at least for their collective home. It's a heartwarming, if incredibly messy aspect of the show that adds a layer of emotional resonance to the otherwise completely unhinged proceedings. It's the glue that holds this wonderfully weird world together, proving that even a grumpy squid and a greedy crab can find common ground when the very fabric of their existence is threatened. And that, I think, is a pretty profound message for a show about a talking sponge. So, after all that, after the endless cycle of Krabby Patty formulas and Plankton's increasingly elaborate but ultimately doomed schemes, we actually get a bit of a shake-up, a genuine, honest-to-goodness movie. And this isn't just some extended episode. This is the movie, the one that hit theatres in 2004, the big screen debut, and it changes things, at least for a little while. This is where the lore, for a brief shining moment, gets to stretch its legs and really go for it. Now you'd think after all the success, Mr. Krabs would be content, right? Living the dream, raking in the dough from his single iconic Krusty Krab. You'd think that, but you'd be wrong. Because apparently, the insatiable hunger for money knows no bounds, even for a crustacean who already owns a restaurant that prints money. So what does he do? He opens another one. Not across town, not in a neighbouring reef, but literally right next door. The Krusty Krab 2. I mean, the sheer audacity of it. It's like opening a second McDonald's directly adjacent to the first one, but somehow even more redundant because the original is already a global phenomenon in Bikini Bottom. It's a testament to Krabs' business acumen, or maybe just his complete lack of imagination when it comes to expansion. He could have franchised, he could have diversified, but no, just more Krusty Krab, same location, new sign, and of course with a new restaurant comes a new management position. Naturally, SpongeBob, bless his absorbent heart, believes this is his moment. He's been the fry cook, the heart and soul of the Krusty Krab, for what feels like eons at this point. He's saved the restaurant more times than I can count, thwarted Plankton's plans with an almost supernatural consistency, and generally embodies the spirit of the place, if that spirit were 99% pure, unadulterated enthusiasm. He's got his little manager's uniform all picked out, his speech rehearsed, probably practiced it in the mirror with Gary as his captive audience. He genuinely believes he's earned this, and honestly, who could blame him? He's the most dedicated employee in the history of dedicated employees. But Mr. Krabs, in a move that I'm still trying to process years later, decides SpongeBob is too immature. Too immature. The same SpongeBob who has repeatedly demonstrated an uncanny ability to navigate complex situations, albeit usually by accident or with the help of a well-timed dose of pure innocent luck. The same SpongeBob who, despite his childlike demeanour, is arguably the most responsible employee Krabs has, in the sense that he actually cares about the job beyond a paycheck. Instead, Krabs gives the manager position of the Krusty Krab 2 to Squidward. Squidward, the guy who actively despises his job, his co-workers, and frankly, most of existence. The guy whose primary goal each day is to do the absolute minimum required to avoid being fired, and even then, he often fails. It's a baffling decision, one that speaks volumes about Krabs' priorities, which apparently lean more towards anyone but SpongeBob than competence. It's a classic Krabs move, really, always prioritising the bottom line, or his own twisted sense of logic over the obvious choice. I mean, the man once tried to sell SpongeBob's soul for 62 cents. So yeah, too immature is just another convenient excuse for whatever internal logic Krabs is operating under at any given moment. Naturally, SpongeBob is devastated, absolutely crushed. His dreams, his aspirations, his meticulously planned manager's uniform, all dashed in a single, dismissive wave of Mr. Krabs' claw. It's a rare moment where SpongeBob's relentless optimism actually falters, and it's genuinely heartbreaking to watch. He doesn't just get sad, he gets depressed, like full-on, moping around, unable to function, existential crisis depressed. It's a level of emotional depth we don't often see from him, and it underscores just how much this promotion meant to him. So, what do you do when your world crumbles and your lifelong ambition is declared a pipe dream by your penny-pinching boss? You go to the Goofy Goober's ice cream party boat, obviously, because nothing says drowning your sorrows quite like an industrial quantity of ice cream and a giant peanut mascot. He drags Patrick along, who, true to form, is more than happy to participate in any activity that involves excessive consumption of sugary treats. And they do just that. They gorge themselves on ice cream, on sundaes, on whatever bizarre, brightly coloured concoctions the Goofy Goobers offers. It's a scene of pure, unadulterated gluttony, a desperate attempt to fill the void left by SpongeBob's shattered dreams with frozen dairy. They're singing the Goofy Goober song, they're wearing those ridiculous peanut hats, and they're just completely, utterly lost in their ice cream-induced stupor. It's a coping mechanism, a very unhealthy one, but a coping mechanism nonetheless. And while they're wallowing in their sugar coma, oblivious to the world outside their ice cream-stained booth, the actual plot of the movie decides to kick into high gear. Because while SpongeBob is having his emotional breakdown, Plankton, ever the opportunist, is watching. He's observing Mr. Krabs' newfound success, the Krusty Krab 2, the expanded empire, and it's driving him absolutely mad. His own restaurant, the Chum Bucket, is still a resounding failure, a monument to his culinary ineptitude. And so, he decides enough is enough. No more petty schemes, no more direct assaults on the Krusty Krab. This time, he's going big. He activates Plan Z. Now, Plan Z is not just some random designation. It's the culmination of all his evil genius, the ultimate, foolproof, no-holds-barred plan to finally, definitively eliminate Mr. Krabs and seize control of the Krabby Patty formula. And what does Plan Z entail, you ask? It's simple, really. Steal King Neptune's crown and frame Mr. Krabs for the theft. Because apparently, in Bikini Bottom, the best way to destroy your business rival is to implicate them in a royal crime that carries the penalty of death. Seems like a bit of an escalation, even for Plankton. But hey, when you've been failing for decades, you tend to go for broke. And he actually pulls it off. Plankton, with a level of competence we rarely see from him in the series, manages to steal King Neptune's crown from the royal palace. I mean, think about that for a second. This isn't some trinket from a pawn shop. This is the crown of the literal King of the Sea, presumably guarded by, royal guards and ancient magic and all the things you'd expect to protect a monarch's most prized possession. But Plankton, using some surprisingly effective gadgetry and probably a healthy dose of stealth, infiltrates the palace, bypasses whatever security measures are in place, and makes off with the crown. It's a genuinely impressive feat, one that highlights just how dangerous Plankton can be when he sets his mind to it, and isn't distracted by, say, trying to hypnotize a jellyfish. He doesn't just steal it, he orchestrates the whole thing to perfectly frame Mr. Krabs, leaving behind a fake note and all the necessary incriminating evidence. It's a masterclass in villainy, a far cry from his usual, I'll just shrink myself and sneak into the Krusty Krab routine. So with the crown gone, King Neptune, as one might expect, is not pleased. In fact, he's absolutely furious. This isn't just a missing accessory. It's a symbol of his power, his authority, his very kingship. And when a godlike being of the sea gets angry, things tend to get a little dramatic. He arrives at the Krusty Krab, not with a gentle inquiry, but with a full-blown, thunderous, rage-fueled entrance. The sky darkens, the ground shakes, and Neptune himself, a towering, imposing figure, descends upon the unsuspecting restaurant, radiating pure, unadulterated wrath. He's not there for a Krabby Patty. He's there for answers, and he's not in the mood for pleasantries. And who does he confront? Mr. Krabs, of course, because Plankton's frame job was, for once, incredibly effective. All the evidence points directly to Krabs. The note, the convenient timing, the general reputation Krabs has for being a bit unscrupulous when it comes to money. Neptune, with his divine powers, and presumably a direct line to the truth, doesn't even bother with a lengthy investigation. He sees the evidence, he sees Krabs, and he immediately jumps to the conclusion that Krabs is the culprit. It's a classic case of mistaken identity, but with much higher stakes than usual. Krabs, for his part, is utterly bewildered. He's a lot of things, but a crown thief isn't one of them. He's a cheapskate, a workaholic, and occasionally a terrible boss, but he's not a criminal mastermind who would risk the wrath of a god for a piece of jewellery. He's genuinely innocent, but the evidence, cleverly planted by Plankton, is overwhelmingly against him. It's at this crucial, tension-filled moment, with Krabs' life quite literally hanging in the balance, that SpongeBob finally arrives. He's still reeling from his ice cream binge, probably still a little sticky, and definitely not in his right mind. But the second he sees Mr. Krabs in peril, accused of a crime he didn't commit, his depression vanishes. His loyalty, his unwavering belief in the good of his friends, even the ones who just crushed his dreams, immediately takes over. He snaps out of his sugar-induced stupor and, despite everything, steps forward to defend his boss. It's a testament to SpongeBob's character, really. Even after being denied his dream job, even after being called immature, he still stands by Krabs. He promises to retrieve the crown, to clear Krabs' name, to set everything right. It's a bold, almost foolish promise, considering he has no idea where the crown is or how to get it, but it's SpongeBob, so you kind of just accept it. King Neptune, however, is not easily swayed. He's still furious, still demanding justice, but he sees something in SpongeBob's earnest plea, perhaps a spark of genuine conviction, Or maybe he's just amused by the sheer audacity of this little yellow sponge. So he makes a deal. He agrees to spare Krabs for now, but only if SpongeBob and Patrick, because where SpongeBob goes, Patrick inevitably follows, can retrieve his crown from Shell City. And he gives them a deadline. 6 days. 6 days to journey to a legendary, almost mythical place, retrieve a stolen crown, and return it to Bikini Bottom. It's an impossible task, a suicide mission, but SpongeBob, with his characteristic blend of naivete and boundless optimism, accepts without hesitation. And so, the stage is set. SpongeBob and Patrick, two of the most unqualified heroes imaginable, embark on a quest that will take them far beyond the familiar confines of Bikini Bottom, into a world of danger, adventure, and surprisingly, catchy musical numbers. Their journey to Shell City begins, a journey to save Mr. Krabs, restore the crown, and maybe, just maybe, prove that SpongeBob isn't so immature after all. We'll get to the absolute insanity that is Shell City, trust me, but for now, just know that this is where the timeline really starts to get wild. So with the paddy wagon now a smouldering husk and their spirits equally charred, SpongeBob and Patrick are just kind of sitting there, defeated, when suddenly, out of nowhere, Princess Mindy, King Neptune's daughter, shows up. I don't know how she found them, or why she's just cruising around the middle of nowhere, but she's there, and she's got a plan, sort of. She gives them this bag, right, and she calls it a bag of winds. Now you might think, oh, a magical bag of winds, like in Greek myths, that'll blow them where they need to go. And you'd be wrong. It's literally just a bag with some air in it. Her explanation is that it's supposed to help them get back to Bikini Bottom if they ever get stuck. Which, spoiler alert, it absolutely does. But in the most convoluted, nonsensical way possible. It's less a magical artifact and more a very poorly explained plot device. But hey, it's the thought that counts, I guess. Anyway, they're feeling a little better, a little more hopeful, and they continue their trek on foot, because what else are they going to do? They're just two small, absorbent, starfish-shaped idiots wandering through a desert. And then, because Plankton is nothing if not thorough, they encounter Dennis. Now, Dennis is a character I genuinely love, mostly because he's just so absurdly over the top. He's this hulking, muscle-bound hitman, hired by Plankton specifically to stop SpongeBob and Patrick. He's got these ridiculously spiky boots, a gravelly voice, and he's just generally menacing. He's also, for some reason, obsessed with stepping on things. His whole shtick is that he's going to step on them. It's a very simple, very effective villain motivation. He corners them, monologuing about how he's going to stomp them flat, and it looks like it's curtains for our heroes. But then, in a moment of pure, unadulterated deus ex machina, a giant boot comes down from the sky and crushes Dennis. Not SpongeBob and Patrick, mind you, but Dennis. And who is this giant boot attached to? None other than the Hoff, David Hasselhoff. Yes, that David Hasselhoff. Because, of course, so David Hasselhoff, in full Baywatch regalia, is just casually walking across the ocean floor, somehow not drowning, and apparently he's just in the business of offering rides to anthropomorphic sea creatures in distress. He offers SpongeBob and Patrick a lift to Shell City, which at this point they're just desperate enough to accept. They clamber onto his back, and Hasselhoff starts swimming at an almost impossible speed across the ocean. It's a truly iconic image, and one that perfectly encapsulates the movie's blend of genuine heart and utter, unhinged madness. Their journey on Hasselhoff's back is eventful, to say the least. They're basically being water skied across the ocean, dodging giant fish, navigating treacherous currents, and generally just holding on for dear life. It's a testament to their sheer willpower, or perhaps their complete lack of self-preservation, that they manage to stay on. And then they arrive. Shell City. Now, up until this point, Shell City has been built up as this mythical, terrifying place. A place where no one returns from. The very name strikes fear into the hearts of Bikini Bottomites. So, what is it? Is it a dark, gothic metropolis? A desolate, monster-infested wasteland? No. It's a roadside souvenir shop. A completely normal, human, land-based roadside souvenir shop. Which, honestly, is funnier than anything else they could have come up with. The sheer anticlimax of it all is perfect. They're inside this souvenir shop, which is filled with all sorts of nautical knickknacks and trinkets, and they're just kind of wandering around, bewildered, trying to figure out where King Neptune's crown could possibly be in this bizarre human establishment. And then they see it, under a heat lamp, the crown, just sitting there, next to a bunch of dried-out sea creatures, clearly part of the shop's inventory. It's a truly humiliating fate for a royal artifact, but also, again, perfectly in line with the film's comedic sensibilities. But as they grab the crown, they realise they're not alone. All around them are the dried-out husks of other sea creatures, victims of the very same heat lamp that's now slowly but surely dehydrating SpongeBob and Patrick. They're starting to shrivel, to crack, to turn into little crunchy bits. It's a genuinely tense moment, as they're literally seconds away from becoming permanent souvenirs themselves. And then just when all hope seems lost, they remember Mindy's bag of winds. They open it, and instead of a gentle breeze, a torrent of water erupts from the bag, completely drenching them and the surrounding area. It's enough to rehydrate them, to bring them back from the brink, and also to completely flood the souvenir shop, which I'm sure the owner was thrilled about. And then, because the plot demands it, David Hasselhoff bursts through the wall of the shop, grabs them, and immediately starts swimming back to Bikini Bottom. Again, no explanation for how he knew they were in trouble, or how he found them again, but who cares? It's Hasselhoff. He's a human speedboat. They make it back to Bikini Bottom, but it's not the Bikini Bottom they left. It's a desolate, eerie place, completely under Plankton's control. Everyone is wearing these mind-controlling buckets on their heads, shuffling around like zombies, chanting, "All hail Plankton." It's a genuinely chilling sight, and a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic town they usually inhabit. Plankton, now a giant, megalomaniacal dictator, is lording over his enslaved populace, clearly enjoying every second of his newfound power. SpongeBob and Patrick, armed with the crown and their newfound confidence, confront Plankton. He's got his entire army of bucket-headed slaves, and he's ready to crush them. It looks like another impossible situation. But then SpongeBob, remembering Mindy's earlier words about being a kid, realizes what he needs to do. He pulls out a guitar, and with Patrick on drums, they launch into a full-blown rock anthem. It's a surprisingly catchy song about being a goofy goober, and it's delivered with such raw, unadulterated enthusiasm that it actually works. The sheer power of their rock and roll, the message of embracing your inner child, somehow, inexplicably, breaks Plankton's mind control. The buckets shatter, the citizens of Bikini Bottom snap out of their trance, and Plankton is defeated. Again. He's tiny, he's powerless, and he's back to being the annoying, scheming Plankton we all know and love. King Neptune gets his crown back, SpongeBob is hailed as a hero, and everything goes back to normal. Well, as normal as things get in Bikini Bottom. So the biggest question, after all that, the absolute biggest one, is how did Mindy know about the bag of winds? Like, where did she get it? Is it a royal artifact? A gift from a sea wizard? Is she just carrying around random bags of water? And for that matter, how exactly does David Hasselhoff breathe underwater for that long? Is he some kind of human-fish hybrid? Is he just holding his breath for an impossibly long time? And what happened to the owner of Shell City after it got completely flooded and then had a giant human burst through its wall? Did they get insurance for that? And what about Dennis? Is he just permanently flattened somewhere in the desert? Are there other hitmen out there who are also just waiting to be stepped on by giant humans? Anyway, next time, we'll dive into the absolute chaos that is the first few seasons of the show itself. Or maybe we'll tackle the surprisingly complex lore of Adventure Time, or perhaps even the surprisingly dark origins of the Powerpuff Girls. We'll see. So that brings us to 2015, a year that, it really just throws a cosmic wrench into everything we thought we knew about this universe. Because get this, there's a pirate, a literal pirate named Burgerbeard, and he finds a magical book. Not just any magical book, mind you, but one that makes anything written in it come true. Now, I don't know where this book came from. Was it just lying around? Did he inherit it? Is it a common artifact in this world? The lore is just utterly silent on the provenance of this reality-bending tome. And honestly, it's a little frustrating. You'd think an object capable of rewriting existence would have, I don't know, a backstory, a creation myth, a warning label, something. But no, it just is. Anyway, Burgerbeard, being a pirate and presumably not a fan of, say, quiet contemplation or advanced astrophysics, immediately uses this unimaginable power to write himself into the story of SpongeBob SquarePants. Yes, you heard that right. He literally writes himself into existence within their world, which, if you think about it, implies that the entire SpongeBob universe is, at some fundamental level, a narrative construct, a story being told, and this book is the meta-narrative tool to manipulate it. This is a level of fourth wall breaking that makes my head spin, because it suggests a conscious author, or at least a highly malleable reality. And what does he do with this god-tier ability to alter reality? He steals the Krabby Patty secret formula. Of all the things, the Krabby Patty secret formula. Not world domination, not eternal youth, not unlimited riches, though I suppose the formula is a form of riches, but a recipe for a fictional hamburger. The priorities are just baffling sometimes. And of course, because this is SpongeBob, the theft of the Krabby Patty formula doesn't just cause a slight inconvenience. Oh no, that would be too simple. Instead, Bikini Bottom, the entire undersea metropolis, descends into absolute, unmitigated anarchy. Imagine, if you will, a society so utterly dependent on a single fast food item that its absence triggers a complete societal collapse. Citizens, previously jovial and relatively law-abiding, turn savage. They roam the streets in gangs, riding modified vehicles that look suspiciously like their own homes, engaging in what can only be described as a brutal, post-apocalyptic scavenger hunt for the last vestiges of Krabby Patty. The sheer, unbridled chaos that erupts from a stolen recipe is a testament to either the incredibly potent, addictive qualities of the Krabby Patty or the incredibly fragile mental state of the average Bikini Bottomite. I lean towards the latter, honestly. There are few sandwiches short of a picnic, as it were. Naturally, SpongeBob, ever the optimist and perhaps a little naive, initially believes that Plankton, his long-standing nemesis, is responsible for the theft. This is a reasonable assumption, given Plankton's entire life's ambition revolves around acquiring said formula. So, SpongeBob, with his characteristic relentless pursuit, chases Plankton through the crumbling, riot-torn streets of Bikini Bottom. It's a chase that, frankly, is less about justice and more about a desperate scramble for answers in a world gone mad. The irony, of course, is that Plankton is just as bewildered as everyone else, perhaps even more so, because he didn't do it. It's like finding out your lifelong rival, the person whose existence gives your own purpose, has been sidelined by a literal pirate with a magic pen. It's got to be a blow to the ego. In this sea of madness, a strange truth emerges. SpongeBob and Plankton are the only two individuals who even remember the Krabby Patty formula, or more accurately, they remember parts of it. Neither can recall it fully, which is a rather convenient plot device if I'm being honest. It prevents them from just, writing it down and solving the entire crisis immediately. But it also highlights their unique connection to the formula. SpongeBob, as the fry cook, has an intimate, almost spiritual understanding of its creation. Plankton, as the obsessed thief, has meticulously studied every aspect of it. They are two sides of the same Krabby Patty coin, forever bound by this singular culinary obsession. The extent of the societal breakdown is truly something to behold. Mr. Krabs, the usually shrewd and money-hungry proprietor of the Krusty Krab, becomes a feral, muscle-bound brute, leading a gang of survivors. Squidward, the perpetually grumpy cashier, transforms into a wild, unkempt wanderer, playing his clarinet mournfully in the ruins. And Patrick, SpongeBob's best friend, and generally a creature of pure aid, becomes a ravenous, almost zombie-like scavenger, obsessed with finding any scrap of food. It's a stark portrayal of what happens when the very fabric of their society, built on the foundation of a greasy burger, completely unravels. The personalities we've come to know and love are stripped away, revealing a primal, almost terrifying core. It's a bit much for a kids' movie, honestly, I'm just saying. Faced with this utter pandemonium, and realizing that their individual efforts are fruitless, SpongeBob and Plankton, in an unprecedented move, decide to team up. This is a monumental shift in their dynamic, a true enemy of my enemy situation. They are the only ones unaffected by the chaos, presumably because their lives revolve around the formula, so its absence creates a different kind of existential crisis for them, rather than a hunger-induced frenzy, and therefore the only ones capable of rational thought. However limited, their goal, find the formula. And how do two tiny sea creatures, one a sponge and the other a plankton, go about finding a magically stolen recipe? They decide to build a time machine. Because naturally, that's the logical next step. Their chosen method for time travel is, shall we say, unconventional. They attempt to construct a time machine using a photo booth. Yes, a photo booth. I don't know if this is a commentary on the inherent absurdity of their universe, or if there's some deep, unexplained scientific principle at play where photographic chemicals and light exposure can bend the space-time continuum. I genuinely have no idea. The writers just kind of drop this on us and expect us to roll with it. And to their credit, we mostly do, because by this point, we've seen so much weirdness that a photo booth time machine almost makes sense. Almost. Predictably, their first attempt at time travel goes awry. Instead of going back to the moment before the formula was stolen, they accidentally travel to a future where Bikini Bottom is an even more post-apocalyptic wasteland. Because of course, things can always get worse. This future is even more desolate, more ruined, and presumably even more devoid of Krabby Patties. It's a brief but impactful glimpse into a potential dark future, a warning of what might happen if they fail. It adds a layer of urgency and raises the stakes even higher, which given the earlier societal collapse is quite an achievement. And then just when things seem utterly hopeless, a magical dolphin named Bubbles appears. And Bubbles, who looks suspiciously like a regular dolphin with some rather impressive glowing eyes, reveals that he is the cosmic overseer of the universe. Yes, you heard that right. A dolphin. A magical, cosmic, universe-overseeing dolphin. This is where the movie just throws all pretense of internal consistency out the window and embraces pure, unadulterated absurdity. Bubbles, apparently, has been watching over the universe, including the SpongeBob one, for eons. He's bored, apparently, and decides to help SpongeBob and Plankton travel through time. Because why not? When you're a cosmic dolphin with infinite power, what else are you going to do with your Tuesdays? This introduction of Bubbles is a complete game changer, not just for the plot of the movie, but for the entire cosmology of the SpongeBob universe. It implies a higher power, a benevolent, if slightly mischievous, entity that can directly intervene in the affairs of Bikini Bottom. It's a major revelation, one that completely recontextualizes everything that has come before. And it sets the stage for the next phase of their adventure, as they finally get a proper guide through the temporal currents. So with the Krabby Patty formula gone, the entire fabric of Bikini Bottom society just sort of unravels. It's a whole thing, mass hysteria, post-apocalyptic vibes, which is honestly a bit much for a missing sandwich recipe, but hey, it's the Krabby Patty. Anyway, SpongeBob, ever the optimist, figures out that the formula didn't just vanish, it was stolen. And naturally, he suspects Plankton because, well, Plankton always suspects Plankton. The whole town suspects Plankton. It's his brand, really. But here's where it gets interesting, because Plankton, for once, is actually innocent. He even tries to steal the formula again, just to prove he didn't steal it the first time, which is peak Plankton logic. When that fails spectacularly, and the town turns into a Mad Max-esque wasteland, SpongeBob and Plankton, in a truly bizarre turn of events, team up. They build a time machine, because why not, and try to go back to the moment the formula disappeared. This, as you might expect, goes horribly wrong. They accidentally send themselves, and the Krusty Krab, into some kind of cosmic void, meet a talking dolphin named Bubbles, who monitors the universe and generally cause more chaos than they solve. Eventually, though, they get a clue. A single, solitary drop of Krabby Patty grease that smells distinctly human. This is the big reveal. The moment they realise the theft wasn't an inside job, but an outside job. And by outside, I mean above the surface. So armed with this incredibly specific and honestly kind of gross clue, SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, Squidward and Sandy, because everyone wants their Krabby Patties back, decide they have to venture into the human world, which for them is basically another dimension, a very dry, very dangerous dimension. They pop up on a beach which, let's be real, is probably the least surprising place for sea creatures to appear in the human world. And what do they find? Not a pirate ship in the traditional sense, all sails and cannons, but a food truck. Because of course the modern pirate isn't after gold, they're after intellectual property and a good profit margin. This food truck, which is definitely a pirate ship in disguise, belongs to a guy named Burger Beard. And this Burger Beard, he's not just any pirate. He's the guy, the mastermind, the one who's been messing with Bikini Bottom's entire culinary ecosystem. Burger Beard, being the villain he is, can't resist a good monologue. He reveals that he's been using a magical book, a book that can literally rewrite reality, to steal the Krabby Patty formula. His plan, which is surprisingly mundane for a magical pirate, is to open a hugely successful food truck business. Because why plunder treasure when you can plunder recipes and sell them for profit? It's the ultimate capitalist villainy, really. He's been using the book to make his pirate crew, who are actually seagulls, do his bidding and to generally just mess with the fabric of their world. It's a whole thing. Now, our heroes can't just let this stand. They need that formula back. And since they're in a magical book, it stands to reason they can use the book's magic too. So they do. They transform into superheroes. Because when you're facing a magical pirate with a reality-bending book, what else are you going to do? SpongeBob becomes Invincibubble, which is a pretty on-the-nose name for someone who can create impenetrable bubbles. Patrick becomes Mr. Super Awesomeness, and his power is, predictably, super strength, but also, apparently, the ability to summon ice cream. Because Patrick, Sandy, ever the pragmatist, becomes the rodent, and she's a super squirrel with super speed. Mr. Krabs naturally becomes Sir Pinch-a-Lot, and his power is, you guessed it, super strength and the ability to shoot money. Because Mr. Krabs and Squidward, in a move that surprises absolutely no one, becomes Sour Note, and his power is to shoot sonic blasts from his clarinet, which honestly is probably just what he does on a normal Tuesday. They then proceed to battle Burgerbeard and his pirate crew, who are still seagulls, on the beach. It's a truly chaotic scene, with superpowered sea creatures fighting a pirate and his avian minions, all while the magical book is still doing its thing, making things even weirder. There are bubbles, ice cream, sonic blasts, and a lot of very confused beachgoers. Meanwhile, back in Bikini Bottom, or rather, still in the cosmic void where he was left behind, Plankton has a moment of clarity, or perhaps a moment of extreme desperation. He realises he can't let SpongeBob and the others have all the fun, or more importantly, all the credit. So, he manages to get his hands on some superpowers too. He transforms into Plankton, a genuinely muscular, super strong version of himself. He's basically a tiny green super buff hero, and he shows up just in time to join the battle, because what's a superhero team without a last-minute addition? The battle rages, with all of them using their newfound powers to try and reclaim the Krabby Patty formula. It's a classic good versus evil showdown, but with a lot more cartoon physics and a distinct smell of the ocean. Eventually, after a climactic battle that involves a lot of property damage and probably a few bewildered seagulls, they manage to retrieve the Krabby Patty formula from Burgerbeard. He's defeated, the magical book is secured, and the world is, for the most part, returned to its proper order. With the formula back in hand, they return to Bikini Bottom. And, as you might expect, the return of the Krabby Patty formula brings peace back to their home. The post-apocalyptic wasteland vanishes. The citizens of Bikini Bottom return to their normal, chaotic, but generally happy lives, and the Krusty Krab is back in business. It's a happy ending, a triumph of friendship, teamwork, and most importantly, delicious, delicious Krabby Patties. The entire ordeal serves as a stark reminder of just how important that secret formula is to the stability of their entire society. It's not just a sandwich, it's the bedrock of their existence. And honestly, it makes you wonder, if one pirate with a magical book can cause that much trouble, what else is out there? What other threats lurk in the human world, just waiting to mess with Bikini Bottom's fragile peace? And what about Bubbles, the cosmic dolphin? Is he still out there, watching? And what exactly is the Krabby Patty formula anyway? We'll get to that, trust me. Next time, we could dive into the bizarre world of the Fairly Odd Parents, unravel the tangled web of Adventure Time, or perhaps finally figure out what exactly happened in Gravity Falls. So, after all that, we've seen SpongeBob go from a tiny, inexplicably sentient sponge in a pineapple, through countless Krabby Patty hijinks, the rise and fall of various jellyfishing empires, and even a brief stint as a live-action CGI character. It's a journey, I suppose, of unwavering optimism in the face of cosmic indifference, and the slow, agonizing descent into madness that is working in fast food. The core, though, always remains that bizarre, unshakable friendship between a sponge and a starfish, and the existential dread of a squid who just wants 5 minutes of peace. And that is the complete SpongeBob SquarePants timeline.